action.
I propose to end the domination of Silicon Valley. Project Main Strike.
A secret plan.
For which each of you will pay me $100 million.
And a secret weapon.
We're not sure about her. Name's Mayday.
Someone will take care of you.
Oh, you'll see to that personally, will you?
There's only one man who can stop them.
The name is Bond. James Bond.
And I'm Dick Tracy, and you're still under arrest.
In the world of high adventure, the highest number is still 007. Roger Moore is James Bond 007 with Tanya Roberts, Grace Jones, and Christopher Walken. Has James Bond finally met his match? Find out this summer in A View to a Kill. Title song performed by Duran Duran.
The following is a paid advertisement. Really? A paid advertisement? Wait, the B-Movie Cast got paid? Yes, the following is a paid advertisement. This episode of the B-Movie Cast is brought to you by the estate planning services of Twyla Minear Brooks, attorney at law. Remember, when the zombie apocalypse comes, things will move pretty fast.
The body should be disposed of at once, preferably by cremation.
Well, how long after death, then, does the body become reactivated?
It's only a matter of minutes.
Minutes? Well, that doesn't give people time to make any arrangements.
Oh, you're right. It doesn't give them time to make funeral arrangements. The bodies must be carried to the street and burned. They must be burned immediately. Soak them with gasoline and burn them. The bereaved will have to forego the dubious comforts that a funeral service will give. They're just dead flesh and dangerous.
So don't leave your estate planning needs until the last minute, because you don't know when that last minute could come. Call Twyla Minear Brooks, attorney at law, at 859-351-2294. That's 859-351-2294. Remember, when you go, you don't want people saying,
"Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up."
Twyla Minear Brooks, attorney at law, is licensed for practice in the state of Kentucky. Consult your local attorney for matters outside of the state of Kentucky.
Command Mark, the time will be running at X-20 seconds. Mark, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire.
Spawned by the continuing decline and fall of society as we know it, and created on the second-floor spare-bedroom studio in the Piedmont of South Carolina. Podcasting on a shoestring budget and changing the world one freak at a time. It's the B-Movie Cast with your host, Vince Rotolo.
From coast to coast and worldwide via the internet, this is the B-Movie Cast, the podcast of unusual film and television.
Hi, guys, and welcome back to B-Movie Clubhouse. Before I go any farther, I want to get our contact information out of the way. We love hearing from all of you, So we have a feedback segment devoted to your comments and suggestions, and this is how you can contact us. Option 1, pick up your phone and dial 888-936-0808. This is a toll-free number and a very easy way to leave a voice message. Option 2, you can make your own MP3 file and send it in to bmoviecast@gmail.com. Or use your smartphone voice software and record a call, then just send that in as an attachment instead. Or option 3, if you're not into talking, you can just shoot us an email to bmoviecast@gmail.com. Our website is bmoviecast.com, where you can subscribe to the podcast. It's free, and there you can join us on the Facebook bmoviecast fan page and letterbox. Also, you can play the contest by sending in your answer by email to bmoviecast@gmail.com with contest in the subject line. And check out the links while you're there, or buy a T-shirt. I currently have smalls to 4Xs. If you want to help us financially, there's a donation box you can click on as a supporter on the Lugosi, Karloff, Agar, and the infamous Xanadu level through PayPal. Also, the easiest way to donate is to click on the Amazon bar on the right side of our homepage. This Amazon link will take you to Amazon.com to make your purchase. It doesn't cost you anything, and you can still log into your personal accounts when you get there. It's completely private, so think about us before you buy online. So now, through the miracle of modern technology and thousands of miles of wire, server farms, PCs, Macs, the Internet, and duct tape, we have our co-host from Lexington, Kentucky, author, editor, screenwriter, film producer, Nic Brown. He has a new website. It is authornicbrown.com. That's AUTHORNICBROWN.com. He is the author of the Werewolf for Hire book series, starting with Blood Curse. He's also selling a book in collaboration with his wife, Fiona, the B-Movie Cookbook. All of these are available on Amazon. He's produced 2 movies, Wretch and Loss Prevention. Both can be ordered on Blu-rays or DVDs through Amazon. He is also the producer of a 3rd film, the soon-to-be-released Fall of Usher. Also joining us today is a fan favorite, the extraordinary photographer and our good friend from London, Mark Mawston. His website is markmawston.com. That's MarkMawston. You can also buy his work on rockarchive.com, the world's finest print archive specializing in rock and roll imagery, featuring some of the most famous rock photographers on the planet. Mark's photographs have been featured in many of the leading titles in the music press, such as Mojo, OMM, and Music Collector. His work can also be seen in books such as I Was There, 50 Gigs That Changed the World, as well as most of the leading nationals, such as The Times, The Guardian, The Telegraph, and The Independent. His shots have appeared on CD and DVD covers and liner notes. Today's film is a Mark pick. It's part of our continuing B-movie mini-series. B is for Bond. It's the 14th entry in the James Bond series of films made by Eon Productions, and the 7th and last to star Roger Moore's 007. Our movie today is A View to a Kill from 1985. Directed by John Glenn, produced by Albert Broccoli, with incredible music by John Barry. It's not exactly a B-movie since it made about, over $50 million, but it is the final Bond film to have Lois Maxwell as Miss Moneypenny. I personally was disappointed in Christopher Walken.
What?
Yeah, I could see glimmers of the psychopath persona that he has in this movie, but I wanted more. You know, because like in later years, he really nailed crazy. And
yeah, but you can't caricature of himself later on. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Chris Walken. Oh, hello, everybody, but sorry, I have to interject. Disappointed in Chris Walken. Those are words I never thought I'd hear in the English language, ever, apart from 9 Lives. Oh. I'm stunned. I'm absolutely stunned, Mary. But there you go. But, of course, it could have been David Bowie.
It could have been David Bowie, and that would have been
a great James Bond.
Hey, but he skipped this movie to do Labyrinth, and come on.
What's wrong with that?
I know.
It's my kids, obviously, throughout our lives would not be the same without Labyrinth, because obviously my kids don't call him David Bowie, they call him the Starman Goblin King. And it has been like that forever. So he is in his Jarrod, and Great quick story. We used to have some friends up in towards Newcastle, and they had kids before us, and they said, "You have to introduce them to Labyrinth." I said, "You don't need to tell me that. It's a masterpiece." And they went, "Yeah, but really, seriously," she says, "because it's given us more laughs than anything else." And I said, "Why is that?" And she says, "Our youngest was watching it, and obviously David Bowie's codpiece is quite predominant in that film." and the kid was just staring at it, and she said, "Mummy, what is that?" And the mother turned around and said, "Don't go there, darling, because you'll only grow up disappointed." Thank you, Sarah.
Love that.
But Nick, you're right. When it comes to it, who wouldn't have wanted David Bowie as Jerry? I mean, it's one of his key roles. I mean, it's up there with anything he's ever done. So, I would never... Obviously, I would love to have seen David Bowie do the theme, but you can't top the theme in this one either. And, Christopher Walken, yeah, great, but... is it because he didn't go over the top enough for you?
Yeah, I think that's it. Because, like I said, later in life, he really nailed crazy.
He did, but don't you think he's also a bit William Shatner in the way he poses?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
he definitely went to the Shat school of acting.
He went to the Shatner approach in this one, but I love Christopher Walken in this film.
And I really liked him too. And I got to say this, Mary, I think he was trying to be a little bit restrained, because, and this is my thought. He was trying to have his character be a little bit restrained because you can't just be zonked out, full on Christopher Walken insane. And run a major corporation. You can try. I mean, Elon Musk is trying really hard.
But isn't he, basically?
Yeah. By the way, okay, I'm going to say this on the podcast officially. I'm putting it out there in the world. So I will be the one that everybody knows called it. Freaking Elon Musk is actually Lex Luthor. You watch. You watch. Okay? Yeah. All right. Now I've said it. We can go on, and hopefully minions won't show up at the door to kill me any minute now.
You've got those little yellow things turning up there. They're awful. Anyway, man, get back.
Back to the film.
Chris, sorry, your intro, but sorry, I was just taken aback by the fact that someone was disappointed in Christopher Walken as Zoran, because I think he's just brilliant.
I guess I just like Christopher Walken so much, and like I said, later on he nails crazy really well. And
he does, but then again, you look at his best roles, like in The Dead Zone, where he's really restrained, and he's magnificent in that. And in True Romance...
Oh, God, I love him in that.
That is Christopher Walken's greatest 10 minutes, as far as I'm concerned, in True Romance, with that talk with Dennis Hopper. I just love that scene. And he's very like Zoran in that scene. If you look at it, the way he laughs when he's embarrassed and stuff like this. And there's a bit in A View to a Kill where it says, "You're a physiological freak." And he's laughing, and then he stops dead, and you can just see he's like really mad. He's quite mad. And I love that scene. And I like the fact that he reined it in a little bit. I think that's great.
Yep. Okay, well, that's your duty during this podcast, is to convince me why you guys like this movie so much.
What? Are you saying you dislike... Oh, you're one of the... See, I think Nick and I, and there's another guy called Mark O'Connell who wrote Catching Bullets. We're about... There's about 3 or 4 people who really love this film. I adore A View to a Kill. And as I said to you before, when we were doing that, when I go to all these Pinewood meetings, for Bond stars and stuff like this, and we're meeting, you will always hear, if you're sitting around the table, and this is not anywhere digging at anybody else, but you always tend to hear the same movies, which are From Russia with Love, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, probably Goldfinger, and those are the ones, and Casino Royale, which I agree with. They're always the ones, because they're the ones that people will reel off as the best. And yeah, when it comes to serious Bond or, the connoisseurs Bond, they probably are. But it's like, as we've mentioned before, Bond is like your first Doctor Who. It's the one that you see first, and Roger Moore was my first Bond. He was the one I grew up with. He's the one I adore. I then saw Sean Connery and agreed, as we said last cast, that he is James Bond. But Roger Moore is my Bond. And A View to a Kill, the reason I love this movie so much is because I was at the zenith of my Bond obsession, sort of in around the time of Octopus, You Never Say Never Again, when they came out. And as I said to you in the last podcast, I queued up in a white tuxedo outside the cinema waiting for the local premiere. But it was great because I got to meet Maria Stavin and all those people, so it was pretty cool. But, this film, the reason I love it is because I was really disappointed in Octopussy, and I was really disappointed, especially in Never Say Never Again. Everyone was waiting for this amazing return of Sean Connery, and it was like a TV movie, I thought. I really didn't like Never Say Never Again. And when I was that age, very impressed, I just thought, what's happened? Why isn't this great? Why is Thunderbolts so much better than this? And it had to do with the music. Some of the cast were great. Klaus Maria Brandauer is great, and most of the cast are great. Like Fatima Blush is wonderful, but it just didn't work. And I was like, why? And the only bit of Octopussy that I truly loved was the ending where he's on the plane, fighting on the plane. And I'll never forget, I came home from that premiere and my parents said, what was it like then? And I went, I really don't know. And they were shocked because I was like totally obsessed with Bond. And I just said, I really don't know about Octopussy. And it's interesting, as I've got older, I appreciate it now for what it is, which is a Cold War espionage movie. It's probably very close to sort of the Fleming feel, and it is quite a Cold War film. And I appreciate it more now, bar the terrible jungle scene where he gets chased, which should have been the greatest moment in that entire film, because obviously it's based on Most Dangerous Game, which is you guys have covered on the podcast, and which is one of the great movies by the director of King Kong. I truly love The Most Dangerous Game. And when I heard that there was a sequence like that in Octopussy, I was so excited. And then when it happened, and it was just, with the terrible Tarzan laugh, sort of, terrible, terrible thing. And I just thought, what on earth has happened? And I remember thinking, is this how low the Bond franchise has sunk with this, with the rubber snakes and spiders and the tiger, which is obviously stuffed, coming out and him saying sit? It was just pants. And I just remember thinking, oh, this is rubbish. And it's the first time I'd ever thought that about a James Bond film. Obviously, this was before Quantum of Solace, everybody. But, I was, really quite shocked by how poor it was. And because Never Say Never Again was not very good either. And it was supposed to be the ultimate Bond time, the two Bonds fighting out the Battle of the Bonds. And it was not worth the bother. And then A View to a Kill came out, and I adored it. But I think the reason is, as with you, Mary, and as with you, Nick, it's what you were doing at the time, where you were, how you were, that you love a film for what it is. It's not so much the quality of the film, it's what you were doing at the time. And I think we'll get onto this, but View to a Kill came along at a time where I was in acting school. I was having the best time, and it came along. And even though, it was very tongue-in-cheek at the beginning, I went along with it. I just relaxed, went along with it. I wasn't, expecting too much after the last two films, and adored it. And there are so many pure Fleming moments in this film that it always amazes me that it's really left behind. And when you hear, votes on the greatest Bond movies, it's either bottom or second bottom. And many people, agree, don't like it. They just don't like it. I love A View to a Kill. I truly do. And, when I say pure Fleming moments, the fact that they go to a chateau and he says it's a beautiful chateau because the man who built it thought he was going to be reincarnated as a horse, and that's why these are for the horses. I just love that. Now, that's something you'd read in a Fleming novel. I love that. The bit where he's in the Rolls Royce and he gets the air out of the tyre and everything. Pure Fleming. It's wonderful stuff. And I think there's so many great parts in this. But the reason why I like it is because it's got great support characters. And the movie has time to breathe. And the reason for that is probably because Roger Moore himself was getting older. And as you touched on, Mary, it was the end of an era. It was the last one with Moneypenny and everything. Desmond Llewellyn was obviously getting towards the end of his tenure, or we thought, but he went on for another decade. But he was, it was sort of the end of an era Bond. It was the last Roger Moore, the last Lewis Maxwell. It was, you felt as though you were seeing, if you were to go to a farewell tour of your favourite band, they play all the hits, but they also throw some new ones in. This is what this movie felt like to me. They covered all the basics, and a lot of people say, View to a Kill is very like Goldfinger in the fact that in Goldfinger it was gold bullion, in this it's silicon chips, microchips. It's very similar in feel. But as I said, it covered everything I wanted. It had everything I want from a Bond film. And I hadn't seen a film like the Chantilly scene where they have the dinner party of the Four Seasons playing in the background. There hadn't been something like that in a Bond film for a long time, which was beautiful to watch, with all the classical music and him in his white tuxedo with a camera in his ring. That's what you want from a Bond film. And just the way it was carried off and filmed and everything. I love this film. And still do to this day. It's got a very, good place in my heart, and it's always going to be in my top 5. And, when people are sitting around, as I touched on, they'll go through the obvious ones, like Rush with Love or what have you. But I will always say, and we touched on this before, I'll always mention Moonraker and Spy Who Loved Me, because they're the films I really, grew up with, and they're the ones I love. And they, to me, are the same film. You can't separate those two films. They're great. And everyone says, oh, Moonraker's a terrible film again. And I think, no, you need to go back and watch the first hour of Moonraker, because it's absolutely brilliant. It's got some of the darkest episodes in a Bond film, like when she's being chased by the dogs through the forest. That's an amazing scene with the John Barry music in the back. It's very dark. The centrifuge trainer sequence is fantastic, and there's no quip at the end of it. He looks shocked and stunned, and he looks at, and there's no throwaway line, and you think, oh, that's different. So for the first hour of Moonraker, right up until the terrible gondola scene, where they're in, where the gondola starts.
Yes.
That's when it starts to change. But then again, you go back to the beauty of the outer space shots, and the flight into space and all that kind of stuff, and that amazing music and the great laser battle at the end of it. So, and it picks up again. And it does go through a little bit of a strange phase, but the first hour of Moonraker is brilliant. But there are so many good parts to A View to a Kill that I don't understand how people are missing it, but it's interesting.
You were saying, Mark, that View to a Kill, part of the reason you love it is it's a product of when you saw it and where you were in your life. And I have to agree with you. It hit the theaters the summer of '85, and that was a great movie summer. But not quite as good as the summer '86. Summer '86, we had The Fly, we had Aliens, I believe we had Mannequin. Yeah, I threw Mannequin in there. Leave me alone. Uh-huh. But we also had Big Trouble in Little China. Now, '85, we had View to a Kill. We had Back to the Future. Some really cool stuff in there. And that movie was probably the most '80s Bond film. Yeah. I mean, it just screamed 1980s the whole time you're watching it.
I think that's what bothered me it dated itself. It stuck.
Yeah, see, but I love there's a huge thing for the 80s at the moment, like, when it comes to Stranger Things and what have you. Mm-hmm. And I love it for being very 80s. And, you have the ultimate 80s soundtrack with Duran Duran, which, it doesn't matter, how many years pass. My kids still think that's one of the greatest of all the James Bond themes. And it's the one that you tend to hear more than anything. You disagree, Mary? You don't like it?
I love Duran Duran, but...
Right, okay.
I don't know. It just didn't seem to fit to me. I don't know. It was just, the movie just seemed so incohesive to me. That
It's interesting. I wonder, Nick, just out of interest, do you like A View to a Kill?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I did like it. I did like it, and I liked it better than, because the Bond films were getting silly before that. With the Jaws guy in there and all that kind of stuff. So I like it because it kind of brought it back down to earth again.
Well, the interesting thing, Mary, is the fact that we've got this really totally wrong. And Nick, I should have mentioned this the other day on the internet, but it's this weekend marks the 40th anniversary of For Your Eyes Only, so we really should have been doing that one. But the thing is, you're talking about things going over the top and Bond being out of space, Moonraker and what have you, Mary. But For Your Eyes Only is the one that brought them right back down to earth. And that was a really great film. I love For Your Eyes Only. I think it's wonderful. And even the Bill Conti soundtrack, again, is one of my favorites. And it's interesting because obviously I'm a huge John Barry fan, and we touched on the fact that, I even, knocked the room through so I could put his doors in our house. But the fact is that, I love John Barry, but some of my favorite soundtracks are the non-Barry soundtracks. I love Bill Conti's soundtrack, and I love Marvin Hamlish's soundtrack for Spy Who Loved Me. So it's interesting that in my favorite soundtracks, there are several which aren't Barry. But then again, as I said to you before, James Bond is basically John Barry in my book, because he did You Only Live Twice, which is probably the reason I love that film the most, because it's my favorite soundtrack. The way it sounds is fantastic. But the interesting thing is, we were talking about A View to a Kill, and a lot of the people may not like it because obviously it's the end of an era Bond. Things are a lot slower in this film, but I like the fact that it builds to these set pieces. But, the music, we might as well touch on it now, is very dour. If you listen to, bar the Duran Duran theme, the actual music and the soundtrack is very low-key and very dour. Mm-hmm. And it's some of it's like quite funereal. But there's one, the reason I love Bond, and you touched on this, just, we were both talking about it. At the time, as I said, I was in acting college, and I was having a great time, and we were all sitting round, and the Duran Duran single came out, and it was on the jukebox. And of course, being a Bond obsessive, I used to put this on. And then I took a chance, and this is before the soundtrack was released. On the B-side was the instrumental version of View to a Kill, but it's beautiful. It's called Wine with Stacy. And it is absolutely stunning piece of John Barry music. And it's very slow. It's with an oboe and a violin and a cello. And it's on the B-side. And I used to put that on a lot in the common room. And people used to think, well, what the hell is this? Because in and amongst the Bon Jovi, well, not Bon Jovi, but, in amongst the, the music of the time, because remember, this was, Live Aid time, all the big hair metal bands and everything were coming to the fore. I used to put this piece of music on that people used to think, what the hell is that at first? And then other people started to put it on. And it became the soundtrack of that summer to me, because we'd be sitting, in our common room part, and this would constantly be playing, and I loved it. And there was a girl I remember called Julia May, who everybody liked, and she was the typical 80s girl. She was very tall, sort of blonde hair, which was, sort of up, sort of like cut short, but up and spiky, you couldn't get more 80s. And she was like the ultimate, catch. And I remember we were all sitting around, and everyone was saying, what are you doing, this weekend or what have you? And I said, I'm going to the local premiere of the James Bond film, View to a Kill. I'm really looking forward to doing that. And she piped in, she goes, I'd like to see that. And everybody stopped, and I went, well, I've got 2 tickets if you want to come. And that was it. So that's why I loved that film, because automatically all my mates who really fancied this girl and who wanted to go out with her for ages, I just said, well, I'm going to see. And she said, I'd like to go. And that was it. And so then, we started going out with each other. It was fantastic.
So now,
and we always say about June the 27th and everything, and why I wanted to do this date. There used to be this huge fun fair up in there still is actually, but obviously with COVID kicking in, it's not there so much. But it was an amazing thing, and it's basically 5 miles big if you walk around it. It's the biggest fun fair, and all the fun fairs from Europe congregate on this huge piece of land just outside Newcastle, my hometown.
What's a fun fair?
A fun fair, a carnival, with all the big rides and stuff.
So with carnies, with their small hands.
So so full of Donald Trumps. But it was amazing, and it was huge, and it had every ride from Europe and all the big rides from Germany, because Germans always had the biggest fun fair rides, and we loved it. So I went to see View to a Kill on Friday. Then on the Saturday we all went out, and I took this girl along with all my friends, and they were going, I can't believe you're going out with her, and which was great. And so it was just when the stars align, and it was just one of those times where it was just like, this is great. And of course, you were just about to kick into Live Aid. It was the absolute epoch of the 80s. Yeah. Exactly halfway through the decade. The music was great. I know you probably don't like the music as much as the 60s stuff, but, the music there was, I loved 80s music, and it was great, like the Duran Durans of this world. And it was just a wonderful time. And I think that's why I love this movie and hold it in such affection. Yeah. And I think it has to do with where you saw it and how you're feeling at the time, the reason why you like a movie so much. And I always have done, and I've always associated it with it being a summer movie this time of year, because it is when it was released, and it was interesting. And it was also interesting, the fact that it was released in America before Britain, because of all the, because Dianne Feinstein, the mayor of San Francisco, let them do so much filming, and let them set City Hall on fire and all sorts, and close down streets so they could go through it with a fire truck and everything. She was so cooperative that they said, right, we're going to hold a premiere here. And it was a long time before the British got it. I think you had it in May, and we got it in the June.
Wow.
It was really interesting, that. And I think the only time that happened previously was only a couple of days, which was Thunderball. I think Thunderball appeared in America first, if I remember rightly. But so the View to a Kill was the big thing. And for it to be seen in America first, we were like really disappointed over here, thinking, why are they getting to see it before we are? They're British movies about a British agent and what have you. But then you saw it and you saw how much took place in America. Mm-hmm. You could see why, so it was great. But anyway, Nick, you were saying, I mean, did you just like it for what it was? Or?
Well, I think part of it was the time, and in America in the 80s, we had my generation grew up sitting in front of the TV watching MTV,
yeah.
And this was the funnest, most entertaining Duran Duran video.
It was.
I mean, you had them stick those little flying cameras in to circle around James Bond during the scenes from the movie.
And, which had nothing to do with anything, really.
Nothing to do with anything. But, they had to insert themselves into the movie. So, and in the music video. And that was, a fun way to do it.
It was.
And it was and I always remember the bit where he's, chasing Grace Jones up the Eiffel Tower, and that's really heavily featured in the music video.
Yeah, well, it's all filmed on the Eiffel Tower, isn't it?
Yeah,
and it's got the great fade-out line. It's Bond, Simon Le Bon, which I always loved, and always got a wry smile, and then blown it up. But it's really interesting because in the book on Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is the next one we're going to do, when they go to the heraldry office, they find out that one of Bond's ancestors is Sir Otto Le Bon. So it's really interesting, the fact that Ian Fleming wrote a character saying that James Bond was related to a Le Bon, and there was Simon Le Bon singing the theme tune and saying, Bond, Simon Le Bon.
Huh. That's funny.
Yeah.
Wow. So, Mary,
yes,
did you actually see View to a Kill in the theaters when it came out?
I don't think we did because, like I said, there's that whole run of the silly Bond movies. And we kind of got turned off to Bond, and of course, Vince's favorite was Sean Connery, so he never really warmed up to Roger Moore all that much. And I think this is when we were building the house that we're in now. So life kind of got in the way of.
Life got in the way of seeing the James Bond movie, Mary. How dare you?
Yeah, I know.
You really need to get your priorities straight. This whole building house, whatever. But no, and. The thing is, I can see why some people don't like it, and I'm kind of with you, Mark. I was 13 when Octopussy came out, so I was busy doing the tee-hee when they said the name of the movie, but at the same time, I was like, wow, what's going on with this stuffed tiger? I mean, even at 13 years old, I'm like, what's that? But... I do think View to a Kill came back as, even though it's got some of the sillier moments, I think it's actually got a lot more of the dark moments.
Absolutely, I totally agree.
I mean, there is so much dark stuff just lurking right under the surface in this movie. Well, and right there in the front, I mean, there's Zorin mowing everybody down with a machine gun. That's pretty bloody dark when you get down to it.
Well, it's funny you should mention that because I had obviously, having the fortune of being Roger Moore's photographer for the last 10 years or so, through Bond Stars, through Gareth and what have you, and down at Pinewood, and I used to do all these book launches, and I found myself sitting in the green room with them once. There was no one around, and I managed to ask him a couple of questions. One on Grace Jones, which we'll touch on later, which was, so if there's any children listening to this, best take them out of the room at that point. But I said to him, I love A View to a Kill, and I'd given him, through the years, I asked him to sign a couple of things. I've got A Spy Who Loved Me poster, which is signed by the entire cast, Barbara Bach, so it's amazing. So everyone's on there. It's really sad because obviously there's lots of these people aren't around anymore, like the Ken Adams, the Richard Keels, Roger Moores, Shane Rimmer. They're not with us anymore, sadly. But, and I've got a For Your Eyes Only poster signed by the cast, including Roger and what have you, Moonraker. And I've got an original sort of drawing of a poster which wasn't released. And I handed that across to him to and we got onto A View to a Kill, and he said, do you like A View to a Kill? I said, I love it. I said, it's one of my absolute favourite movies of yours. And he turned around and he said, well, it's my least favourite. And I went, oh. And I was really disappointed to hear that. And I said, why is it your least favorite? He said it was just too violent. And he said, the bit where Zoran mows everyone down made me feel sick. And he said, I just thought there's too much violence in the world. And that does not need to be in a James Bond film. And the fact that it is so violent and so uncalled for, I really disliked it.
Wow.
And so it's never been one of my favorites. And I thought, with my age, he said, when you get to be, the same, you're the same age as the actress who you're with's mother, it's time to bow out. And he was the usual beautiful, flippant, humorous Roger Moore, but there was his face sort of kind of changed when he said it. He said, yeah, I just thought it was too violent. I really disliked that whole scene, and it ruined it for me. And I thought that was amazing, So it's funny you should mention that about it being dark, but that's one of the reasons why Roger Moore thought that the thing had changed. And of course, it got even darker 2 years later with 4 years later with License to Kill. Because that was an incredibly dark film. And out of all of them, you're looking at Casino Royale and License to Kill, they're probably the two darkest. But View to Kill has very dark moments in it. Yeah. And it's interesting the fact that Roger Moore liked Casino Royale so much, which is far more violent than A View to a Kill. It's a completely different beast.
But I think it's a different kind of violence, though, at the end of the day. I can totally get what he's saying, because the scene with Zoran and his main henchman guy, up there with the Uzis, and they're just shooting these guys as they're trying to get out of the water because they're drowning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that's execution. Mm-hmm. And you're watching execution on this mass scale. I mean, it's not like there's two sides that are fighting. These are desperate guys just trying to get out of the water because they're drowning.
Yeah, and also shows the madness of Zoran, the fact that, and the guy comes up to him and no one's mentioned, these are loyal men, and he doesn't care, and he just mows them down, and that, again, shows that he's an absolute psychopath.
Yeah, and he even leaves Mayday and, Jenny Flex and his most loyal henchmen, not just his minions, but his, like the minion bosses, the loyal henchmen. He leaves them pretty much all to hang. And, okay, I'm going to say this. I'm that other guy, and I can never remember his name because he wasn't played by Grace Jones, but kind of the dude that was always there, the head of security.
Scar.
Yeah, Scar, thank you. Yeah. I don't know how I cannot remember that, but
Scarpino.
I just remember if I'm Scar and I'm standing there and I see him leave Grace Jones, who he's also sleeping with regularly. She's got the henchwoman / mistress thing going on, and he leaves her to die. So I'm Scar, and I'm thinking the only reason I'm not down there being shot is because I was up here with you when you picked up the gun.
Yeah.
That really does not breed loyalty to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I can totally see why that versus good God, I just said Quantum of Solace. Sorry. Versus
How dare
Casino.
You swear on this podcast?
I know, right? I almost feel like I swore there. I really No, but I can totally see why, the violence in View to a Kill, even though it's a darker violence in Casino Royale, it's a different mental picture for it. And I can totally understand where Roger Moore was coming from with that.
Yeah.
Because honestly, I dislike scenes like that where they mowed down all those guys, because that just feels overly cruel to me. But that's, they could have just had them flood the mine, show a couple of scenes, the miners rolling out or whatever, and that be that. But then to have him there with the machine gun mowing everybody down, yeah.
Well, they had to show he was a psychopath, though.
Well, you knew he was a psychopath. Trust me,
see,
you could tell.
I didn't catch the whole psychopath thing.
Well, he's like bursting out laughing as he kills all these people.
Yeah, that's when I finally got it.
Well, I think that's subtle acting. I love his. There's a bit where Roger Moore goes to his office and Christopher Walken captures him on a video screen, side profile, and he brings up that he's really James Bond and not St. John Smythe. And when Christopher Walken sort of laughs at the screen, when he sees who he really is.
Yeah.
I love that scene. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And we talk about Moore in this, and it's really important because this may be Roger Moore's least favourite Bond, but it's one of my favourite Bond performances in this because he plays it very straight. All the silly bits, which there are, which we can touch on later on, it's a very serious role that he takes on. He's very serious about this whole thing. And there's a wonderful bit where after they've chased, he's put them on the horse and everything, and he's trying to get away, and they kill Tippett, which is a really key thing, which a lot of people didn't like because he was such a likable character. When he turns around to Christopher Walken and says, and Christopher Walken turns around and goes, "You amuse me, Mr. Bond." And Roger Moore turns around and said, "Well, the feeling is not mutual." The way he delivers that line and the look on his face is absolutely brilliant. And it's really interesting that Roger Moore had some really dark moments. We talked about, the centrifuge trainer, and there was no flippant line. There's a line in, there's a scene in Pure Eyes Only where he kicks the car over the cliff, where he chucks the dove, the badge in there, and he sort of kicks the car off the thing. And Roger Moore was really against anything like that. He really didn't like the violence that crept into some of the movies. And his idea to John Glenn was the fact that it would be far more Bond when he had his little badge with a dove on it, which shows who he was working for Christatos or what have you. And he threw the badge into the car, but it was the weight of the badge that knocked the car over the cliff. And John Glenn said, well, let's film both ways. Let's film you kicking the car off and the badge, and we'll see which one works. And, of course, there's an amazing scene where he really does give it a really good welly, and he kicks the car off the seat. And it's one of the darkest Moore moments. And most people will tell you that's one of their favourite bits of Roger Moore's Bond. And it's interesting that the scenes he didn't like so much, which he thought were too dark, are most of the fans' favourites. And it's really odd that the most serious Roger Moore ever is as Bond is when he's dressed as a clown in Octopussy. He's so serious through that whole thing. There's not one flippant line or anything. That whole sequence where he's trying to get to the circus to defuse the bomb, there's not one joke in it. He's absolutely freaking out. He's, shouting and, really serious. And it's interesting that he's dressed as a clown as he does that. And I've always thought, because people pull down Roger Moore for being too flippant and, raising the eyebrow and what have you. But it's interesting that the fact that that's when he said he's more serious. And I wonder if that was sort of a take on that, saying, yeah, I am a clown, but I can be very serious and when I need to be. And he always pulled himself down, Roger. He was so self-deprecating, and his timing is magnificent, as an actor. He's great. And not many people, they always say Cary Grant always played Cary Grant. Roger Moore tend to play Roger Moore. Bar in a couple of movies. There was an amazing movie called The Man Who Haunted Himself. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that.
I've never seen that one, no.
Oh, yeah, it's Roger Moore's favourite movie where he plays his alter ego, so he plays a really evil version of himself. And it's absolutely fantastic. So it's basically like Face Off, 20 years before Face Off. And he goes back to his house as his evil self and sleeps with his wife, and she can't believe how he's changed and, how much violent he is and all this kind of stuff. And she gets to like the evil Roger Moore more than the good Roger Moore. Ooh. It's fascinating, and it's one of the most complex films he ever made. It's really worth checking out, so check that out. But when he needed to do it, he could ask anyone out the room. He was great. And in The View to a Kill, I think, is one of his very best performances as Bond. I've always loved the way he tackles this. And it is flippant. And you've got one of the silliest openings of any Bond film. But as I said to you, when I first saw it, I just went with it.
Yeah.
And I think as long as you go with the flow, the iceberg, I love that iceberg. It's the phallic iceberg. I truly love that. I love that. And it's so silly because it looks like what it is, which is a phallus, basically. And, an iceberg phallus. And it flips up and it's got the Union Jack thing on the top there. And, gets in, there's Maria stabbing. Oh, it's just great. But, the true story behind that is great, isn't it? You're probably going to touch on that, Nick, which is...
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, it was built... and they had real trouble with it, and it was a diesel tank. So basically, the stuntman could only drive it for about 3 minutes without nearly choking to death, because the diesel fumes and everything for that was so bad that they had to climb out and just to breathe oxygen because the tank was so bad inside when they were driving that up. So they could only do a couple of takes in that, or the guy would have literally asphyxiated within that thing, the stuntman who did it.
Okay, that's kind of awesome. I got one comment. That kind of technology probably would have been produced by Q Branch, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. anybody who says Q didn't like Bond a lot, look inside that sub.
Yeah.
Q put a bar and a bed couch in the back of the sub so that Bond could get laid while he was riding back from his mission.
Also, with one of my favourite Bond women, and Mary Stabbins, one of my favourite Bond girls. She was in Octopussy and in this one. I think she's fabulous.
Yes. I won't say anything about the fact that I thought she was hot. Yeah. No, I liked her. I didn't realize she was in Octopussy, too.
Yeah, she's one of the girls in Octopussy. She's the one where they're sitting down, and she says, "Would you like the picture?" And she goes, "I'll leave it at the desk and stuff." She's one of the Octopussy's key hench ladies.
Okay. Wow.
She was also girlfriend of George Best, who I told you that story about. He's one of this country's most well-known sportsmen ever, and we got to be friends with him. And she used to go out with George Best, and there's a wonderful story. I mean, I told you the story about when I met him and how it was and how we became friends with him, which was amazing. I'm sure. Did I tell you that story?
Well, I think you told me that story, but I don't know.
Okay, well,
if
I'll
you
not
told
tell it again.
Everybody.
I'll not tell it again. But there's a wonderful story where he was in Las Vegas with Maria Stavin, and he'd just been to the casino, won quite a bit of money, and Maria Stavin was lying on the bed throwing money all over, literally on this big round bed, and this little Irish porter came up and he goes, "Hello, George, it's good to see you." And he opened the door and he looked in, he popped in, he saw Maria Stavin lying round with all this money and throwing the money up, and he just turned around to George and he said, "George, where did it all go wrong?" which is a story I love. So yeah.
That's brilliant.
I think she's fabulous in this film. I really like her.
No, she was fun. I mean, the biggest thing, some of the characters just don't get enough screen time.
No.
That's my one complaint, because I would like to see more of her. And
Alison Doody, I'd like to see more of.
Alison Doody, okay. I didn't even realize that was Alison Doody at first. And I'm looking, I'm like, oh, wow, that's Alison Doody. And so she did this Bond film, and then later she would be in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade with Sean Connery.
Literally immediately. As soon as she finished this, she was straight on to, she's fantastic in The Last Crusade. And by the way, that last cast on, I would love to have done, Raiders of the Lost Ark, because it's one of my all-time favorite films, but couldn't have done as good a job as the guy who did that. That was really great. And I loved all the anecdotes and the bits he said about it. I really loved that cast. I thought it was great. But if he doesn't want to do Last Crusade, I'll love to do that one.
But maybe we'll have to figure out a way to just have a big clubhouse and do a couple of movies like that.
Because that's not the cup of a carpenter. I love The Last Crusade, and she's wonderful in that film. She's really great.
Yeah.
But while we're on Alison Doody, do you get the name? I've always loved the fact that this was really clever. Jenny Flex. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you know, Mary?
What?
It's the term for an erection. So to genuflect is a term for an erection.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And
right over my head.
Which I think is one of the great names. It's like Chew Me. It's the only good thing in The Man with the Golden Gun. But I love the fact she's called Jenny Flex. And then he goes, she goes, "I'd nothing I like more than an early ride." And Roger says, "Yes, I'm an early riser myself." You miss that in the new movies. That's what you want.
Yeah, and I mean that whole walk where they're walking up the stairs and that was all just him and Alison Doody going back and forth with those little double entendres.
Fantastic.
Which, by the way, then he ends up sleeping with Grace Jones.
Well,
and I know we're getting ready to.
Should we cover that now?
Okay, you know what? Because I'm dying to hear. So, gentle listeners, take your small children out of the room, or better yet, put on Octopussy and let them look at the stuffed tiger. Okay, go ahead,
that's a good
Mark.
idea. Right. So. I don't know if you noticed it, and I'm sure you did, but there's a very heavy cut in the bit where Mayday goes into, when Roger's been in and he's seeing all the stuff in the stables, and he rushes back and he jumps on the drawbridge and gets back and he goes into Mayday's bedroom, and Mayday finds him there, and Christopher Walken looks and goes, "Oh, wow," because they've been looking for him and they think that he's elsewhere trying to find out what's been happening with the racehorses, and he's in bed and he's waiting. He says, "Oh, I've been waiting for you, Mayday." And she goes in and she just disrobes. There's a very heavy cut as he lifts up the sheet. Yeah? If you watch it again, you'll see it. It really jumps.
Yep.
Now, there was a huge rumour going around, and, I thought it might be myth or what have you. But I was fascinated. But Grace Jones and Roger Moore really didn't get on too well at all.
I'd heard that.
And Grace Jones, for that scene, had hidden a dildo, right, onto her person, right, and it got into the bed. And if you watch, she thrusts herself, and Roger's face goes, "What the hell?" Right? You watch that scene again, okay? Now, I thought, well, surely he could see the dildo, but supposedly it was there. And I thought, right, I'm never going to get the chance to ask this again. So I was sitting, again, when we were talking about View to a Kill, and I said, Roger, I said, is that true about that ridiculous rumour that's going around? I said, just say if it's true or false that, she did have an appendage. And he just looked at me, and he said, I don't, spoil the myth. And I went, all right, okay. So there was or wasn't. And he just looked at me, and I said, did you like Grace Jones? And she goes, and he just looked at me and said, I got on with him very well. which was great. So that basically told me that, it really was true. And I've asked a couple of other people who said, that supposedly happened. But my meeting with Grace Jones, so she did the Meltdown Festival, which is the big music festival that I cover. And my picture of Grace Jones became quite well known. It's even used now because she's doing the next Meltdown, and it's all over the place. It's in relevant magazines and what have you.
Wow.
And it's hanging up in the green room in Royal Festival Hall. And we went to this amazing concert, and it was a concert where all these incredible people were doing Disney themes. And she was singing the snake song from, the Jungle Book, Believe in Me or whatever it's called. It's a really dark song. And she was there, and she came on the stage, and they wheeled on this contraption onto stage, and it was a square sort of stage, a mini stage. And I was looking, I said to the guy who was one of the guys who put it on, I said, what's this for? And he goes, wait and see, it's incredible. So Grace Jones came on the stage, stood there, and these fans which were underneath blew up, and she had a dress made of parachute material, and the whole thing blew up. And so it was literally inflated below her. It was mind-boggling. It was so great, and she really is one of the great performers. I've seen her several times. She's fantastic, and fantastic to take pictures of. So one of my favourite things I ever did is, I told you that story when we went to Cannes with the Iron Maiden lot, and we flew on like 666 and what have you. Well, the day I was sitting at the airport, someone was reading the paper in front of me, and I couldn't believe it. And it basically said, Kylie at 40, Madonna's 50, and Grace Jones is 60. And they were all, in around the same time. And it was on the front cover of the paper. And I looked at the paper and I went, that's my picture of Grace Jones. I can't believe it, on the Independent. So I went running to the airport. It was just before the flight. I was just trying to find, a copy of the newspaper. And there it was, and I got so I made the front cover, and I was like, what a day that was, going with Bruce Dickinson, flying a plane, and you've got a picture on the front cover of the Independent. You're not going to forget days like that in a hurry. And, so, and then we buzzed the beach and everything on that plane. It was a great day. Anyway, so through the years, I'd taken a picture, and I'd taken her once before she played that gig, and it was used a few places, but this gig was massive, this Disney gig. And it was, I think it was about 15 acts came on and all sang a Disney song. And at the end of it, because we were the photographers, we could stay for the whole thing. Normally you get first 3 songs, no flash. That's the rule when you take pictures of any band. But this day, because I was shooting the whole thing and I was shooting for the Royal Festival Hall, I could stay for the entire gig. And the concert finished, everybody left, and we had to sit in our place right in front of the stage. And when everyone had left, we were sort of packing up. And one of the other photographers who was there, who was this lovely guy, who I don't see as much of now because obviously there's been no live gigs, we were talking, and I was packing my stuff away, and I had my back to the stage. And he was talking away, and then he just stopped. And I looked at him, I said, "You all right, mate?" And he just looked at me, and he's literally, his jaw was hanging open. And I went, "What's wrong?" And he's like, when someone's eyes are like looking over your shoulder and they can't believe what they're seeing. So I turned around, and there was Grace Jones on her honkers, on a crouched down, right behind me, okay, without any knickers on whatsoever. Right, and there it was. As the Irish would say, she was a really good crack. It was there, right in front of me, glistening away, and I didn't quite know what to do, and it was literally about 2 feet away from me, and I looked up at her face, and she did the, like Fantastic Mr. Fox. She went and winked at me and walked off.
Wow.
So if anyone says, "Have you ever seen Grace Jones?" I will always say, "Yeah, intimately."
Wow.
Yeah, quite a shock, but that's Grace Jones for you.
And that would fit with the whole idea that, oh yeah, she's going to put the dildo on and go Roger Moore.
Yeah. Yeah, what a star. She's absolutely wonderful, though. She really is. And I can't wait for the next meltdown when it finally happens.
Yeah, and it's, and it's funny because she was really hot suddenly in the 80s.
Yeah.
As far as her acting goes, she was in Conan the Destroyer. She was in this. She was in Vamp. She was the head vamp in Vamp. I mean, it was, and then she just sort of disappeared from that and went into, I guess, music. And
well, she did video. I mean, she did that incredible video, didn't she? Was it for Renault where the car drove into her mouth and it was metal? You used to see that all the time. That was a great advert. You pull up to the bumper and all that kind of stuff. It was great.
Yeah. Now, they didn't have that over here, I don't believe, but I've seen it because I've seen it on YouTube.
Yeah, MTV Europe was a lot different to MTV over there because we didn't have as many breaks, but the content was amazing. Some of the ads were like pop videos themselves. They were great, MTV Europe. Really, really good.
Yeah, well, and don't get me started on the fact that music videos don't get played on MTV anymore. It's too busy being a reality show channel. But sorry, I'm an old man and I'm grumpy. Leave me alone. Kids, I get grumpy about my MTV. But no, seriously, Grace Jones was, I loved her in Conan the Destroyer, which, by the way, is not a great movie.
No, but it's fun.
It's fun.
Yeah.
I watched it just a couple of weeks ago. It's great.
And it's got so many just kitschy little. It's a great Conan the Barbarian movie, especially after how dark the first one was.
Yeah.
But okay, I've totally taken us off the rails from we're over on Conan. Let's get back over to
but I love the fact
that
she's called Mayday and she's all dressed in red and everything. It's just little touches like that which is just great.
Well, see, that would go right
she's
over.
One of the most memorable.
That would go right over people in the U.S.'s head.
Really? I thought Red Under the Bed was a huge thing there.
No, I think a lot. Okay, Mary, I think generationally it would go over any post-Cold War.
Yeah,
heads.
Exactly, yeah.
But growing up and as a teenager in the 80s, I remember what Mayday was. So, I get that. And one of my thoughts about Grace Jones, because, she was a model before she was an actress. Mm-hmm. And she had this really eclectic look when she was modeling, and they seemed to always bring that out in her outfits.
She was the most androgynous. She was far, many years before it became the trendy thing to be. She was the definitive androgynous person.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. But I was wondering if she helped pick out her own wardrobe for that movie.
No, she did, and the makeup. Mostly Lindy Hemming, I think, it's taken over now. But I think that it would have been Eon which would have done the dresses, in all honesty, because she was called Mayday in red. But when it came to the makeup, there's a great interview where she was worried that they would think that her makeup and her hairstyle and everything would be just too much for the Bond film. And John Glenn, the director, came in to see her, and he says, "Oh, the makeup." And she went, "Yeah, is it too much?" He goes, "No, more. I want more red." And she said, "Isn't that wonderful? That's absolutely wonderful that he wants that." So she was very happy to do that, and she threw herself into the role, quite literally, when she did the stunt, jumping off the Eiffel Tower mock-up and into the boxes, so they liked her for that. But she was constantly late on set, and she used to drive everybody nuts. And I think that's another reason why Roger Moore really didn't take to her too much, because, she was constantly late, and everyone was very professional. They were there, they were clocking in, they were doing their day's work, and she would always leave everybody waiting till the very last minute. But when she turned up, she was truly great.
And, now that you said that, I remember that scene because you can clearly see it's her in the cut that's obviously the model, not when she goes flying off into the air like a flying squirrel to, parachute off the Eiffel Tower.
Well, there's a great story behind that. Should we quickly touch on that now?
Please.
We might as well touch on these now so I don't have to interrupt when you're doing your synopsis, because I hate to do that. But yeah, the Eiffel Tower scene is great because obviously they went to so much trouble trying to get permission to get the chance to jump off there, and it is truly amazing. But there was a couple dressed up in wedding gear and jumped off the week before, and so the French, the council and everything in Paris said there is no way we're doing this. People are getting wind of what you're going to do. We had some couple jump off last night, and we're cancelling your permit.
Ooh.
So they got the relevant people at Eon, and obviously Moonraker was a core French production, so a lot of it was made in France, and so they had lots of French friends, and they roped everybody in to say, look, this was nothing to do with us. We're professionals. We would never do anything like that. So we're here to make a movie, and we'll make sure that nothing like this ever happens again. So they managed to persuade them to do it. And on the morning, so the guy who did a BJ Worth, he did all the airplane stuff in Moonraker where he gets pushed out, where it looks as though he hasn't got a parachute and everything. He was their go-to guy. I think it was him on the outside of the plane in Octopussy as well. He was the aerial stunts guy. He was, really great. And he worked out by doing something like 50 balloon jumps that when the air got to a certain pitch in his ear, it was the time to pull the cord for the parachute. Because the Eiffel Tower is very thin at the top, but then it goes out at the bottom because obviously of the weight of it, so it splays out. And if he didn't pull the parachute at just the right time, he would literally hit the metal at the bottom because it goes out so much. So he had to get it exactly right. So he did 50 jumps, they worked it out, everything was going to be dandy. If you watch the movie, you can plainly see the running board at the top of the Eiffel Tower where they run off and he jumped off. You can see, if you watch it again, there's a plank, it looks like a diving board.
Yep.
And you can plainly see that as they jump off there because he had to get the distance to go
from
down
the base.
From the actual monument. So they did it in one take. And literally he did it perfectly and landed next to his wife exactly where he was supposed to land. They also landed, on the boat. That was all done perfectly. That was done twice. Once he landed on his knee, but he used to jump for a helicopter to do that, and then he just landed on the second jump, ran across the boat when he's pursuing Mayday. So he was really clever. He was a very, very good aerial stunt guy. But Cubby Broccoli said, right, originally they planned for 2 jumps to get different shots. And Cubby Broccoli said, that's far too dangerous. They were all standing next to this guy's wife and child, and they said, we don't need to tempt fate. We've got everything. We've shot it from 5 different angles. We've got everything we need. The other stuntman was really, really peeved by this. Not very happy because he was waiting for this ultimate thing of diving off the Eiffel Tower, being one of the only people to ever do so. So he was eaten up with disappointment. And he phoned this other guy up at something like about 4 o'clock in the morning. And he said, if we go now, everything's still set up in place. The running board's still there, everything. They won't be taking it down till tomorrow. I've got to do it. I've got to do it. So him and this other guy, because they had their passes and what have you, and they could, the cards, they could get into the set. They went all the way up the Eiffel Tower and got there, but it took them a hell of a lot longer than they thought and they banked on. And they didn't get up until the running spot until 7 in the morning. Now, it was a Sunday and they thought, no one's going to be around. We'll be fine, we'll be okay, but a few people might see us, but hey, we're going to do it. So he went running off and launched himself off there. What he didn't know was John Glenn, the director, and the B reconnaissance team were setting up shots very early because they wanted some early morning shots when Paris was quite empty. And they were planning out stuff, and all of a sudden, this guy goes past, goes, oh, and the parachute opens, and the sound of thunder, basically, as the parachute opened. John Glenn nearly shat himself.
Wow.
And this guy parachuted down and landed up. And then the other guy who he'd taken up did the same thing. And, of course, John Glenn went absolutely ballistic. And that guy was taking off all the Bond films. Basically, he said, you could have cost us the entire movie because if the authorities heard that, we'd said, we don't do anything unprofessional like this ever, and then you go and do that. You could have stopped the film being made in Paris because they had the car run to do with Remy Julien, where they launch and they go off into the bus and everything.
Yeah.
They had so many reconnaissance shots to pick up in Paris that the Paris authorities could have stopped it there and then because of this guy's idiocy, basically. And he last week said, I was taking off, and I always get people saying, I'm filling in your shoes. Who would do that? I mean, I know for a fact that, you can be disappointed if certain things don't happen, but you don't risk everybody's livelihood on a multi-million-pound movie by doing something like that. I mean, perhaps it was just something he had to do, and perhaps he's pleased that he did it, to be one of the people that say, well, I was one of the only ones to jump off the Eiffel Tower, but, he could have ruined it for everybody.
Has he worked since then?
But...
Sorry, Mary?
Has he worked since then?
No, he got banned from everything. He got fired immediately. And he had to be fired by the guy who's his best mate, who he grew up with, who was B.G. Worth, who was the guy who did the first jump. He had to fire him with immediate effect. And he said, you're never going to work on a Bond film again.
Wow. Well,
so, and obviously, the next movie, it's all set with parachutes where they go down on Gibraltar and everything. So the opening scene of, the Living Daylights is all aerial.
Yeah.
So, and then they have that amazing stuff where they're being dragged out onto the cargo of heroin out the back of the Hercules bomb. There was so much he probably could have done, but yeah, he was banned from that. So,
man,
shame for him, really. But it was his own doing.
I was going to say he earned it, but at the same time, it's one of those things like people say, how could you do something so stupid? And I always think back to The Magnificent Seven when. It's one of the characters, and I think, oh God, it was Steve McQueen's character says, somebody asked me, I asked a fellow who jumped into a patch of cactus one time why he did that. And he said, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. And that's just exactly what we got here. They weren't thinking ahead. They weren't thinking about the production. They weren't they should have been. But all they were thinking about was, ooh, dude. And I can hear it. He's like, dude, I've got to pass. Let's go jump off. Nah, dude, we can't. Yeah, dude, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, dude, let's go. Because, if you're going to do that, you got to be saying dude. It's just everything's got to be dude.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there you go. What, Mary?
I mean, he's probably still talking about it. I mean, that would.
Well, he is. He's on the making of documentaries on the. Because as I said to you, the definitive way to watch any of the Bonds is on the Blu-rays because they come with amazing extras, and you'll get a making of. You'll get 4 different documentaries on the sound, everything, location, what have you. Ooh. And on the Blu-ray, they got some amazing outtakes as well. There's a great scene which was never included where. Just after this, where he jumped onto the boat and, the chef catches him and he's very mad because he's been chasing Mayday. The next scene, he was picked up from a jailhouse and M goes to pick him up from the jailhouse and they pull out all the props from previous Bond films like the watch from Rush with Love and all this kind of stuff, the pen from Octopussy, they're all pulled out. And then he says, you have to sign this before you go. And he signs it and the writing disappears and burns the document up and stuff. It's a great little scene. But John Glenn said, it slowed the movie up. So, yeah, that's the kind of thing you get on the Blu-rays of these. They're fantastic, absolutely brilliant. But I remember just it being a beautiful film to watch. And as I said, the Chantilly bit with the Four Seasons playing, it's a lovely film to look at. And when they go to San Fran, they've captured San Fran so brilliantly. It's so fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the very first shot of San Francisco, if I remember right, is Fisherman's Wharf.
Mm-hmm.
And they're there on Fisherman's Wharf when he's meeting his
Chuck
CIA
Lee.
contact. Yeah, Chuck Lee, who, by the way, I thought that was. It's like, is that an amalgam of Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee?
Yeah. It probably was. But David Yip, who played him, was huge at the time. So in 1994, he was a guy called the Chinese Detective, which was a massive hit on UK TV. And so everyone said, oh, wow, look, it's a Chinese detective. How cool is that? And obviously the Bond producers thought, well, let's get Bond to meet the Chinese detective. In the same way that they also got Bond to meet John Steed, which we really should touch on. The fact that Patrick Macnee plays Tibbet, who's one of the most lovable and likable characters in the entire Bond series. And the beauty about it is that Roger Moore had known Patrick Macnee for years and years and years because he used to film The Saint And on the next stage, they were filming the Avengers. So they'd known each other since 1962, 63, 64. And obviously there was a huge, crossover between the Avengers and James Bond, because we'd already had Kathy Gale, Honor Blackman as Pussy Galore. So she'd left the Avengers to make Goldfinger. We then had Dinah Rigg, who was Emma Peel, who then crossed over, left, and became Mrs. James Bond, Tracy.
Yeah.
And then we have Steed himself, who comes across and plays Tibbet, which is great. And the fact is that the reason I love it is because in the higher scheme of things, Tibbet is above James Bond. And Roger Moore and Patrick Macnee play so beautifully off each other that Bond is relishing the fact that he's just treating this boss of his like dirt, because, come on, Tibbet, get a move on, stop wheezing, all this kind of stuff. I love the interplay between the two of them. And the great thing is that it's all based on that he's a racehorse guy. Patrick Macnee's father was actually a racehorse owner and trainer. So he'd grown up around all of this. So it was like the role was literally written for him. And it was, Roger Moore said, wouldn't it be great to get, Patrick Macnee, John Steed and Bond together? And it works fantastically well. And as I touched on, my kids were devastated when he gets bumped off from the car by Mayday. But, he's a real loss to it. It's the same as Pedro Almodovar, where he's lost in From Russia with Love, certain characters are a huge loss in the movie, and you really feel it with Tibbet. But that changes that's when the movie, as we've touched on, becomes dark. Yeah. Because instead of this flippant line, when he sees that Tibbet is dead, he's absolutely devastated. And you've never seen Moore as angry as what he is at that point. It's fantastic. And that sets the tone for the rest of, because after that point, the flippancy is gone. It becomes very, very serious. That's when, as you say, you have Zoran turning on his own men. You get the mine, everything else. It becomes a much darker piece.
Well, and it became personal.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing, because like you said, I didn't realize it makes sense that they knew each other because, they were both doing their shows right at the same time. But, he really, when he darkens up and, what is it? Christopher Walken, Zoran still looks so. And this is the thing, Mary. You say you couldn't see that he was a psychopath. Yeah. I don't know. The way the gleeful look in his eye as he looks at dead people. And, he's got Bond there and he's going to kill him. And it's just this gleeful look. The only thing that didn't fit there to me is, and of course, the villains never learn because they never watch Bond films. When you have James Bond and you've captured him, and instead of putting him into an elaborate trap or even just knocking him out and putting him in a car and sinking it in the lake, just go ahead and shoot him.
Yeah.
Just go ahead and shoot him. And I'm glad that the Bond villains don't see the Bond films or the other ones, because that would be the end of it. They'd know, oh my God, why did we put him in this, Rube Goldberg trap when we've got all these guns, perfectly good guns lying around? I don't know.
Yeah, but that's the part of the thing, because obviously, in a way they had thought it through, because Tibbet had died of asphyxiation because Mayday had strangled him.
Yeah.
And so what the plan was that they'd driven into, how a Rolls Royce had driven into a lake. Yeah, you're right. How on earth would that happen? But, the fact that they were both supposed to be, because he doesn't shoot him, he knocks him out, so he's supposed to drown. But as I said to you earlier, that bit with the tyres, I really loved that. I thought it was great.
Oh, yeah. No, that was brilliant.
The Rolls Royce that was used was, do you remember last time I told you about the Cubby Broccoli and how I put him in his Rolls Royce and everything? And, when I carried him, when he literally wasn't very well, and I carried him to the car. That was the Rolls Royce that they put him in. So that Rolls Royce in the film was Cubby Broccoli's Rolls Royce.
Oh,
and
wow.
The number plate in real life was Cub 1. So that had actually put Cubby Broccoli in that Rolls Royce that's used in the film. So I remember Patrick Macnee, on many documentaries, has said he was terrified because the Shanty it was made for literally riding horses through the gates, and Rolls Royces are incredibly wide. And he was terrified. Cubby Broccoli had actually been driven over from England to Paris to film that in Chantilly in that car. So basically they were going to use that car. So when they're throwing all the dirty water over it and what have you, that was Cubby Broccoli, was always sitting just left of the director, making sure that his precious car didn't get scratched. And when they had at Bewley, they had this amazing exhibition where they had all of the Bond vehicles They had every Bond vehicle, including Little Nelly and everything. And I was lucky enough to be a photographer for it, and I managed to get all of the Bond girls standing round Cubby's Rolls Royce. So that was a lovely thing, and they were all there, and it was just fantastic, Huh. But yeah, that's a special one. But obviously they didn't want to put Cubby Broccoli's Rolls Royce into the lake.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Which is, blasphemy in a way, So what they did was, they didn't even go out and try and make it up. They just bought another Rolls Royce.
Wow.
Oh, wow. But I'm sure what would have happened is they would have taken the engine out of it, because if it looks as though it's a chalk pit, so it would have been fresh water, so it wouldn't have rusted the car. And I'm sure they would have put it in there. And if you look very closely at that scene, you can actually see the metal line pulling the Rolls Royce into the lake.
Really?
Next time you watch it, look to the lake, and you'll see this great big piece of metal line come out of the water and yank the car into the lake. And you can see it coming out. But, so they would have taken the engine out and then probably done the same thing, had a cable to pull it back out again, and then put the engine back in. Because if you look in the San Francisco bit, where the cop cars squashed, if you look there, you can see that those cars haven't got any engines in them, because all the sparks are going off, and you can see through the grille, and there's no engine there.
Oh.
Just the same as it was in Goldfinger, where they crush it down in Goldfinger. When the car's lifted up, when Mr. Solo is lifted up, you can see there's no engine in that car, and that's where all the money is for a car. So
yeah, and thinking about it, that also makes sense, because when you watch the Rolls Royce going into the water scene, it also floats for a minute.
Yeah.
Well, that's because of the air, because the windows are open.
Well, that's the air, but I mean, a Rolls Royce is but yeah, I was going to say that's a super heavy car.
Yeah, it's about
and
2
I know
tons.
and the front end of it was still floating some, and that's where I'm going. It's like, I mean, it's heavy, but if you don't have that engine, then the buoyancy is going to be there. Yeah, so then it gets kind of pulled down.
Yeah.
But and that answers my question, because I was going to say, I mean, it's like, okay, Cubby Broccoli loved that car, so did they really put it in the water?
But there's a guy called John Richardson, not the one that I knew, but there's the special effects guy, John Richardson.
Okay.
And he said that, only on a Bond film would you just say what we're going to use, and we'll go out and buy another Rolls Royce, a duplicate, and you'd think only on a Bond film would that happen. But that's the beauty about Bonds, because, everything's on there, on screen,
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they definitely put their money on camera. And I mean, honestly, the budget for it was, $35 million? Which
really?
At the time, yeah, well, okay. First of all, you say, really? Like, that's not a lot of money. But,
no, it is a lot of money, but...
Well, it's I'd kill to make a $35 million movie today. But if you were making a $35 million movie in 1985, it would probably be a $70 or $80 million movie today.
Yeah. Oh, and probably more, yeah.
Well, yeah, and I mean, if you were going to make a James Bond movie today, then you're looking at $100+ million easily.
And plus, you wouldn't get the excess, like this Diane Finstein, the mayor of San Francisco gave them. They really did have special fire rigs, and they really did set it alight. And there's a great story that Roger Moore always tells, where they told everybody who worked in the city hall, make sure all of your windows are shut, because we're going to hose the building down tonight. So make sure. And one guy didn't, and he came in and his desk was absolutely sodden, and all his work was completely drenched. So so it's the one guy who forgot to shut his window. But yes, you wouldn't get the access that they do. I mean, the way they're driving that fire truck down San Francisco. How much of the town did they need to shut off? A huge amount. You wouldn't get that now. Not that kind of cooperation.
No, I don't think you could. And okay, I do have a question about the fire truck scenes.
Mm-hmm.
So I heard a rumor that at very early in that scene, that Roger Moore actually does get into the truck, and it's him driving it away.
That is true. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he did drive some of it. Not the main.
Not the main bit, obviously.
Yeah, but no, he did drive some of that, and obviously the bit where it jumps across the bridge just before the bridge goes up. If you look carefully, you can see that because it's such a heavy thing, the axle completely breaks in two, and you can actually see it when it lands on the other side. Bang! The whole thing just snaps. So, but the Bond films, or as they were then, were to suspend belief, and was, and that's what they were. Now they're far more, believable and in the real world, and these things kind of happen. Bar the fact that, although I loved Spectre, where does everybody go in the train, Inspector, when they have that huge fight? Where does everybody go? In 1 second, everyone's having their very nice evening meal and he's commenting on a dress, and all of a sudden, nobody's on the train anymore, and they're having this massive fight in 3 carriages where they wreck it. Where does everybody go? So that's about the only time in recent years I can remember where, things have, you thought, hang on, how on earth is that happening?
Yeah.
Because they like to try and keep everything in the real world, which is good up to a point, but every now and again, you need to go back and watch a Roger Moore film and just think, you know what? It's great to watch, James Bond in space, or it's great to watch, Roger Moore, with a ring which takes photographs. That's what you want.
Yeah.
And it's nice to do that every now and again. Or I do it because I always watch A View to a Kill. It's like Halloween 3. It's one of the movies that, I'll always watch, I'll try to watch every year. Because they remind me of a certain time. Always this time is View to a Kill time, and I'll watch it with the kids. And Halloween 3, and it's funny because View to a Kill is actually getting a much better name for itself now in amongst fans. It's becoming much more appreciated. And Mark Gatiss, who's a great writer who did Sherlock and what have you, he's got a huge soft spot for A View to a Kill. And so he will rate it, and lots of other magazines are sitting and think, this movie needs to be reevaluated because it got a really lot of stick at the time because everyone thought Roger Moore at 57 was too old to be James Bond and what have you. But you're looking at it now, bloody hell, Roger Moore looks fantastic for 57. But that might be because after Octopussy, he had that. If you looked, have you noticed his famous mole on his face had gone, and that's because they were a bit worried about that. And I think when he went to get that mole taken off, he had a bit of a nip and a tuck at the same time. So he's obviously had work done, but he looks fantastic. He looks absolutely brilliant in A View to a Kill.
See, I thought he was kind of old.
Did you? Oh, I think he looks much younger than he did in Octopussy. And for Your Eyes Only in Octopussy, I think he looks older than what he does in A View to a Kill. I think he looks great.
I think you're right. I mean, he didn't look young in any of those 3.
Well, that's true.
But I think you're right because of the plastic surgery, and I didn't even notice that the mole was gone. But yeah, you're right. It was just gone. Yeah. And, he was a bit long in the tooth, as it were, for James Bond. But at the end, he retired after this one.
Yeah.
And I think it was a good one to go out on because it didn't look, it looked mostly believable. You could suspend disbelief and see him running around with, I do think
20-year-old women.
Well, I was going to say, I read a comment, one that was attributed to Moore was, that maybe it's time to retire when my leading lady, I'm old enough to be the leading lady's, or date the leading lady's mother.
Well, that's true. He was the same age as Bibi Dahl, who's in Fury is her mother, and that's when Roger thought, aye, I need to think about this. But that's when they modified the character, and so he doesn't sleep with Bibi Dahl, who's the ice skater in For Your Eyes Only, because that would have been just a bit too much of a push.
Yeah.
So what he does, if you remember, in For Your Eyes Only, he says, I'll, get your clothes on and I'll buy you an ice cream. Now that's hilarious because, James Bond's turning down sex because he knows it's wrong, and he's making a comment on it and trying to make light of it, which is a lovely thing to do. But, if you watch any old black and white movies, the women in there are far, far younger than any of the husbands in those movies.
Yes.
Yeah.
You look at any classic film, the husbands tend to be 20 years older than the wives. And that's just the way it was. Even in normal life, husbands tend to be in their 50s, wives could be in their 20s. There was never, no one batted an eyelid. And that's sort of, it started to change in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But Roger Moore was commenting on that, and,
And, okay, I got to say this because I was talking about Fiona with this at one point last year. We'd been watching a bunch of Cary Grant movies. And, we're watching, what was it? I'm forgetting all the names of the movies. Okay, we watched North by Northwest, and then we watched the one where he's on the island with all the orphan kids.
Father Goose.
Father Goose. And then we watched, the one, Arsenic and Old Lace.
Right.
And we're watching these, and these are from 3 different decades, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And we realized that his leading lady was the same age in every one of them. So he's, and it's his romantic lead. And yeah, it was sort of close in the 40s, getting way off in the 50s, and it was just, whoa, dude, you're Dad's dad, dude.
That could be your granddaughter.
Yeah, you know, it's like, wow. Yeah. But yeah, and that is, and it's funny because that's it. People now, you know, it gets looked on a bit askance now, but at the time it wasn't that big a deal.
It was a fantasy, even back then.
It's a fantasy.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I said, you know, it happened in real life too. So, you know, and Roger Moore, his first wife was a lot older than Roger Moore. You know, so, you know, she was a famous singer at the time, and people used to say, wow, your husband's really young. So, you know, it's funny that Roger Moore then got stick for it, you know, being the opposite way around. But I always remember there was this amazing interview. There's a guy called Terry Wogan over here. And Terry Wogan was like Michael Parkinson. I don't know if you've heard of Michael Parkinson. You will have, Nick, because of Fiona. But I don't know if you know of Mary. But he's the most famous interviewer Britain's ever had. And he interviewed everyone from Orson Welles to, you know, you name it. He's interviewed them. And Terry Wogan sort of kind of took over that role in the 80s. And he used to have this show called Wogan on a Monday and a Wednesday. And he used to get loads of really great people on. And it was always at sort of, you know, early evening when you're having your tea. And he got Roger Moore on, and Roger Moore did the most fantastic analysis of the way the press was. And, you know, Terry Wogan has said, you know, Roger, you're getting a lot of grief about your age in this one. You know, a lot of people think, you know, and Roger Moore said, I've said I'm long in the tooth for this for years. I've been trying to tell the producers, but they can't find anyone cheaper. You know, and he was trying to get over it that way. And then he said, does it get it? He said, no. He said, the British press are obsessed with age. If you look at any article in the British press, they will always have the person's age in brackets after the name, which is unneeded, unnecessary. You know, he said, but they've always done it. And he said, I'll give you an example. It will say, Roger Moore, 57, pulled up at Terry Wogan's studio last night in his 7-year-old Bentley. You know, so they will even mention how old the car is. You know, and it was beautifully done. And that was basically Roger Moore just saying, you know, this is the way it is, and you just got to put up with it. But he was so, as I say, self-deprecating that he used to make fun of himself, so no other people would make that much fun of him. And if you think about it, there was a thing called spitting image where they used to do puppets. It was very famous because it could get away with murder by using puppets as real people, and it was very political. And the one on there was the Roger Moore eyebrows one, where they said, can you show me pain? And he would raise his right eyebrow, show me remorse, and it would be his left eyebrow. And then I'd go, now Roger Moore, do the windscreen wipers, and both eyebrows would go up and down. He actually found that funny. And he said, but unfortunately, that labelled him with the eyebrow thing. But he said, if you look at my early stuff in The Saint, I said, I think it goes back to that, because every time the halo went above my head, I used to raise my eyebrow and look up. So he said, I think it goes back to that. You know, which is interesting. The worst eyebrows, if you ever see Elton John, next time you watch Elton John play the piano, watch Elton John's eyebrows. They move more than his hands. It's quite incredible.
Wow. Okay.
Something I noticed. It's really weird. And I was watching a couple of things on Elton John. I went, wow, look at his eyebrows. It's quite mad. Check him out next time.
Okay, now I've got to look at Elton John's eyebrows, and just, you know, I'm going to. That's the problem. I've got too much oddball homework. You know, it's like, okay, I got to do this. I got to look at Elton John's eyebrows. But
I have to binge watch all the damn Bond movies now.
Do what?
I'm going to binge watch all the Bond movies.
You haven't seen them all.
I probably have at some point in time, but it's been so long that I want to sit down and watch them all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Try and watch them chronologically if you can, Mary.
That's what I'm saying, yeah. And watch how they've changed.
It would make more sense.
Yeah.
You know, and you can skip it all depends, because you've got a couple of the non-official Bond movies. You've got Casino Royale from 1967, which is one of the maddest movies. I mean, it is perfect for the B-movie cast because it's, you know, directed by 7 different directors. You know, it's mad. Peter Sellers, Orson Welles, you know, you name it. Woody Allen plays James Bond in it as Jimmy Bond. It's totally out there. But it's very much of its time. But you could probably skip that unless you. It's a great if you're watching it if you're very drunk, and I'm sure you'll agree there, Nick. If you've got lots of women or something, that's the time to watch it. The other one, obviously, Never Say Never Again is the only other unofficial. There's parts of it which are great. There's a couple of great lines where, you know, Fatima Blush skis up, and you know when he's on, you know, standing at the waterside, and she makes him a bit wet, and she goes, "Oh, I've made you all wet." And he goes, "Yes, but my martini's still dry." You know, but there's not enough of that. And it's really not a great film. And it's I wanted to go back and reevaluate it, and I started watching again. I thought, no, this still isn't a very good film. And and I really want to try, because a lot of people like Quantum of Solace. But I try, and I literally, once it gets to Felix Leiter being chucked into the boot, I think, oh, this is just nonsense. The way the whole movie starts, it's as though it's a jigsaw that hasn't been properly put into place or been glued in the wrong places. The way it opens up with just a car revving, you think, hang on, we've come in halfway through a scene here. And none of the, and I know a lot of people quite like that fast editing, but it just doesn't work in that film. And I truly think that's by far and away, along with Man with the Golden Gun, the weakest of all of the Bond films. I really do. So, but
I just like Daniel Craig.
You don't like him?
I do like him.
You do? Oh yeah, he's great.
But he seems a little bit too old to me now.
Well,
he's my age, Mary, so that's very nice of you.
Well, let's face it, guys. We're all a little too old to be James Bond.
Yeah. We're still younger than Roger Moore was in A View to a Kill, Nick.
That's true. We are, and I do think it's funny because Daniel Craig, I don't think he hasn't made as many Bond films as Moore.
No, he's made 5, I think, hasn't he?
Yeah,
made 5. Moore made 7.
Yeah, but I think chronologically he's been Bond longer.
Well, that's because there's 4 years between this and the last one.
Oh, that's true too.
Bond movies used to come out every year at the very beginning, so that's why Sean Connery made as many as he did, because the only time that changed was they skipped 1966, and they went into 60 because there was loads of stuff going on there, and they didn't make one in 1966, but they made one in 62, 63, 64, 65, then 67, and that's when it became every 2 years. Then it was 1969 for Her Majesty's Secret Service, and then it was 1971 for Diamonds Are Forever, 1973. Yeah. Then they thought, actually, no, we'll do one. We'll change everything. We'll make one very quickly off the back of the last one, which was Man with a Golden Gun. And it looks rushed. If you watch Man with the Golden Gun again, it doesn't have the sheen, bar the fact when they go to the islands. It doesn't have that wonderful Bond-esque, quality about it. And there are so many mistakes in Man with the Golden Gun, where they're having the fight where he gets the bullet out of the woman's belly button. They're all fighting, and they hit a mirror, and the whole camera crew are standing there filming it. And you can see them as plain as day, sweating away. And you think, in any Bond, they should have literally cut that out. Yeah. There are so many moments like that in Man with the Golden Gun, which just it looks rushed. And then sort of they waited, and then 74, so they didn't make one until 1977. And then they came back because obviously by that time Harry Saltzman had left the Bond franchise and sold the Bond franchise. And then Cubby Broccoli came back and made Spy Who Loved Me, which is one of the great and huge return to form. And he basically got the audience back within the opening credit sequence where Bond skis off the cliff.
Yep.
That was it. You were back with Bond. Bond was back. Everything was rosy again. And from that moment, they've never really looked back.
Was Roger Moore afraid that he was going to get typecast?
And he wasn't, to be honest, Roger Moore has played iconic roles throughout his career. He was Ivanhoe, and then he was the Saint. Now, most people would always just recognize him as the Saint, and he could have retired on that. But then he went to play Lord Brett Sinclair in The Persuaders, which has got a huge cult following, and James Bond. So he wasn't frightened of it. They were great movies to make. And you've got to remember that Roger Moore, at the time, was playing probably the most iconic, this is before Harry Potter, the most iconic film role in history.
True.
So he really shouldn't have been that bothered. And he was getting paid a lot of money for doing it, and all his suits free. So, anything he wore in the movies he got. So, he could quite happily retire. Yeah, everything he ever was all tailor-made. So he basically inherited everything, yeah. So, who wouldn't? He got a house in Denham because of the Bond films. The money he made from those was quite good.
Yeah.
And he realized he was that clever that in the end he would do it on a per film basis. So he wouldn't agree to do it until the very last minute. To help drive his fee up. But, I don't think he was ever greedy. It was just a cat and mouse thing between him and Cubby because, unlike Connery and Cubby and Roger were incredibly close. They were very, very close and remained so forever. And when he launched the Cubby Broccoli stage, when they made Spy Who Loved Me and they built that huge set, and funny enough, we might as well touch on that because obviously they built that huge set for the Spy Who Loved Me, which was called the 007 stage. when A View to a Kill was just about to be filmed, the movie before View to Kill was Ridley Scott's Legend with Tom Cruise and Tim Curry. There was a fire on set, and the whole of the 007 stage burned down.
Ooh.
And it was great because there's a guy called Peter Mont who was the set designer who we sadly lost recently, and he was such a wonderful man. And I used to always look forward to hearing what he had to say. And he said that he was driving back from a pub and looked up and just saw this huge fire, and he went, wow, what are they doing on the 007 set today? And then realized that it was a fire, and the whole set had been burned, and Cubby Broccoli was devastated. And, so they drove there, and Cubby didn't even want to look there. And he said, he did this great description where he said, the fire had ripped through it so quickly that by the time they put the fire out, it looked like the Hindenburg had crashed onto the Pinewood set.
Wow.
Because it was just charred metal and the bones of what was once a great metal edifice,
Aww.
And he went to Cubby and he said, well, what are we going to do? So he went to the guy who built the 007 set in 77, 76. And he said, what will it cost us to rebuild this? And how quickly could you do it? Because we're going to, be miles behind. And he said, from the moment the site's cleared, it'll take us 2 months. 2 months to rebuild that entire set. And it's enormous, this thing. It's the size of like 4 aircraft hangars. Yeah. And so the guy said, yes. So they cleared it in double quick time. And while they were rebuilding the set, which is the mine, that mine is the entire 007 stage. Yeah. So with all the water when it comes crashing down and all the internals, that's all one set inside the 007, the new 007
amazing.
Set.
Yeah.
That was
they
an
rebuilt
amazing
all
set.
of that. And so they put everything forward, and they all went to Paris, and they did all the stuff in Paris and everything. So they moved the location stuff forward, and all the B units were then sent to, the Swiss Alps and to Iceland to do the opening credits. And so they did all of that. And then, by the time they came back, the new, as it was then, the Cubby Broccoli stage was then in place with all of the mine set ready to go. I mean, incredible. Wow. That's the joy of the professionals and the geniuses and the people who are at the top of their game, like Peter Lamont, were incredible. And these were the people that were associated with the Bond films. So, it's quite incredible. I mean, the huge thrill was 2 years ago, they've got this huge new set at Pinewood, and they've named it after Roger Moore. Which was wonderful. And I was asked along as photographer, and part of the royal family were there. The Duchess of Kent was there, and you had to have loads of security checks done for you and everything. It was quite amazing. And the Bond guys, Gareth Owen and what have you, and Andy had said that, we always use Mark as our photographer and we'd like him to document it. And Ian said, well, we have our own photographer. And, Gareth said, no, we'd really like to, Mark's a big Bond fan. We've used him for years. These are his images. We'd like to use them. And they said, okay, which was a massive thing because Eon never normally let anybody do anything that's not theirs, So I was then introduced to the people who were there from Eon. I said, oh, I understand you do. And I said, yeah. And I was told how to bow. So when the Duchess, and it was an incredible day. So we went in and we had all this etiquette, and she came in and she was absolutely wonderful. She was wonderful. And we had Joan Collins and everybody there as well. So it was a celebration of Roger Moore's life. And so it was basically, they had his funeral, which was just for family. And then they had the celebration of his life at Pinewood, which I was photographer for. So you had people like Joan Collins, all these people that Roger worked with throughout his life were all there. All these incredible stars. Tim Rice, the guy who wrote all the musicals and everything. All these people who he knew. All of his friends were there. His wife was there. His daughter was there. And the cars were there. And, and I got to photograph all this. So we got all these groups of people together, like Joan Collins and Tim Rice. And it was, you can imagine what a thrill it was for me, to be that. And then we went across to the 007 stage, and that's when, she came in and, and you had to bow your head and what have you. But she wasn't into anything. She was just really cool. She was lovely and she was funny and she was very pretty. She looked amazing, like a bit like Princess Diana, which I thought was really strange. But she came in and she did this lovely talk and then launched it, and I took all the photographs of it. So it was a thrill and a half to do that. I can tell you, when they unveiled the Roger Moore stage at Pinewood, and to be there as photographer for it was great. But there's one thing I always remember: Joan Collins was there, and she's got such a potty mouth. She's a wonderful woman. She's a wonderful woman, and she is exactly how you want her to be. and she was swearing away at this table and telling this really rude story, and you had the Duchess of Kent behind her, and she realised, and everyone was like, "Look at the Duchess of Kent," and everyone went, "Ah," and Joan Collins went, "Oh, sugar, yeah, of course," and she turned around, she goes, "I'm sorry, but I'm sorry to swear." She goes, "Oh, don't worry, I lived with Prince Philip." Which I thought was wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
God, that's
and
brilliant.
Did I ever tell you about what happened that day with the dress? Did I ever tell you about Joan Collins and what happened with the barmaid? Did I ever tell you that story?
Yes, that one I know you did.
Yeah, so she was just great. That's the kind of person who you want to be, and who you want to be in exactly how she was. And she was just so approachable and so lovely. So it's great. So yeah, so as a kid watching the 007 stage, be unveiled, and then to see it burn down, then rebuilt for A View to a Kill, then to go on, and then everything's been filmed in there ever since. And then for myself to be the photographer for the Roger Moore stage, it's a thrill and a half.
Wow.
But listen, I've talked so much. I'm just going to get myself a mouthful of water. I'll be 2 seconds. I'll let you get on. Hang on.
All right. Well, while Mark is getting his mouthful of water, ladies and gentlemen, we'll. So, I know you didn't like this one. I'm sorry, what, Mary?
I just can't imagine being there. It is, wow. At Pinewood, being the photographer, seeing all those people, that's just amazing.
It is amazing, and that's why Mark has all the good stories too. So, I could tell you about the time that I. Oh yeah, never mind. But that's okay. And it's good. It's great that we do have folks that we can pull into the show like Mark.
I know,
with just so much experience on this stuff and so many interesting stories. And I got to say, okay, going back to the film. Okay.
Yes.
So, what? Okay, I kind of understand what you didn't like about the film and what you didn't like about Christopher Walken.
I did like it.
Well, no. You can like something and still not like parts of it. That's okay, Mary.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to ask is, what was your favorite part of the film?
Ooh.
What did you really like about it?
Oh,
because I know you've been just thinking about what you didn't like about it. So I'm gonna turn you on your head and ask you to think about what you did like.
The chateau.
The Chateau Chantilly. Is it Chantilly?
It's funny, Mary, because that's Morv and Xanthi's favourite part as well. And I was because I said this morning to Morv, I said, Morv, if I was to ask you what's your favourite scene in View to a Kill, what would you say? She said, the Chantilly bit. And I love the story about the man building it because he thought it'd be reincarnated as a horse. And he said the whole scene. And it's my favourite scene in the entire movie is that, as I said, mentioned a couple of times, is that scene where he's standing on the balcony with the champagne, with Tanya Roberts, and I just love the whole. It's got that real Bondian feel, and the thing I love is the fact I'm sitting looking at it now. I said there's a guy called Keith Hemshire, who we've mentioned a couple of times before, who's a photographer and did the most amazing stuff. And he was a photographer, the stills photographer on A View to a Kill. And he's going to give me his crew jacket, which I'm very excited about. He's got the View to a Kill crew jacket, and he said next time he sees me, he's going to bring it along. So I'm very excited to get that. But I talked to him and I said, he did all the Indiana Jones as well. So he was the stills photographer on Indiana Jones. So he's got all these incredible images. And I told you about the 2001 stories he did, where he was, going to be the original man, who's, the caveman at the beginning. But he shot that entire bit at the Chantilly. Oh. And I said, my favourite scene is where they're standing on the balcony with the champagne. And I said, that is the essence of Bond to me is that scene. And he said, that's really unusual. And he said, I actually have some shots that I never released from that. And about a week later, this package arrived in the post, and I opened it up, and this incredible image of Roger Moore and Tanya Roberts. I've never seen it in any other magazine, any book, and it's the original photograph that he's done, and he signed it. He's put this lovely words at the bottom of it, which I won't say because it makes me sound big-headed, but it's which I'm not. I hate to talk about myself, but
What are the words? What are the words?
No, I don't want to say. I don't want to say because it's. Okay, I'll go and get it. Hang on. It's just. It says, Mark, you were hung like a donkey. Oh, no, sorry, it's not. It says, to Mark, you were so graceful and so talented. Your friend Keith Hemshire. How lovely is that?
Oh, that
yeah?
is
It's this amazing image of Roger Moore and Tanya Roberts, and it's one of my favorite pictures I've ever seen, and it's an unreleased shot from that sequence.
Wow.
And I mean, to get that through the post, you think, isn't that just wonderful? So I always, as I said to you, I changed my little music room around with the seasons, so it'll be covered in Halloween stuff at Halloween, and in the summer at the moment I've got quite a bit of You to a Kill stuff out, at Sign for Your Eyes only and all that, and I've dug that picture out because I like to put that up because I just like looking and think, you've met all these amazing people, and that's such a wonderful thing to have, and I've never seen this picture anywhere else. It's a stunning image, and it's if I was to think of Bond, this is the scene I always think about.
Yeah. That it's beautiful. It really is.
Well, and it's beautiful, and it's a location shot. And at the end of the day, when they do set pieces, the sets are brilliant, but there's a part of my mind that's always like, okay, that's a set. When they're actually on location, that to me is just always so impressive.
Yeah.
And that was such a brilliant location for that film.
Well, they actually write, the Bond films are so great because they actually write the film around the locations. So what they will do is, like You Only Live Twice, they will go to the locations. They wanted to try and find a castle for You Only Live Twice. We couldn't find a castle like it is in Dr. Shatterhand in the novel You Only Live Twice, which is very different. So basically in the novel, Blofeld has got a castle in Japan where he puts the world's most poisonous plants in and piranhas and everything. And people, obviously, if they lose face in Hong Kong, will kill themselves by Harikari. So he gets his kicks out of building this garden of the most poisonous plants and killer fish and everything. So people will come to him to kill themselves. That's how he gets his kicks. So that's what the story is. It's incredibly dark. So that's the novel If You Only Live Twice. So they then went to Japan searching for this amazing castle that Ian Fleming had described, and realized there were no such things as castles. There are temples, as you see in the movie, but there are no castles. So they were flying back, and they looked into the volcano, and Ken Adams said, "Oh yeah, wouldn't it be great if you could actually the villain was in the volcano?" Ditching! Went back and said, "How about this? For an idea, they're inside the volcano, and we do this." And they said, "How much will it cost?" And he said, $1 million to build. Now, $1 million was the entire budget of Dr. No, and this is only on one set by the time it came to You Only Live Twice, which is only 5 years down the line. And Cubby Broccoli said, "Yep, build it." And as we all know, it's one of the most iconic things there. So that's how the Bond movies become written around the set pieces. Man with the Golden Gun, that bit where the car turns into a plane and stuff, that was all written in there because they saw that. And then unfortunately, the guy killed himself in that. And so they had to use a model because the actual thing that actually did fly, which is a car with an airplane attached to it, that crashed. So they couldn't use that. So they had to build a model, which you can tell it is. And the bit with the corkscrew stuff they'd seen on the TV. So they did that entire scene where Sheriff J.W. Pepper's in there and they do that corkscrew jump. The bit where in The Spy Who Loved Me, where Rick Sylvester's jumping off the mountain. That was a faked ad for, I think it was Martini or something, in a Playboy. And Cubby Broccoli had seen it and said, "Get hold of the person. We want to put that in the movie." And of course, it was actually not real. But they asked Rick, and Rick Sylvester said, "Yeah, I could probably do it." So that's how that all came out. So that's how that came around. So the Bond movies have always been written around locations, like obviously Dams Are Forever, written all around Las Vegas. And the reason that came about is because Cubby Broccoli was incredibly friendly with Howard Hughes, and he had a dream that Howard Hughes had disappeared, and that he went to see him because he was one of the few people that ever got to see Howard Hughes as his friend, and Howard Hughes had been replaced by another person. So that was the entire premise of Blofeld taking over Willard White, and Willard White is basically Howard Hughes. That's what the whole story is. It's all Cubby Broccoli's dream. And so the entire script of Diamonds Are Forever around Cubby Broccoli's dream, where Willard White had been replaced by Blofeld in the same way that Howard Hughes had been replaced by this stranger that Cubby Broccoli didn't know. So this is the thing about it, and they will go to the ends of the earth to find somewhere different to film. like Moonraker, you know, with those amazing falls where the boat goes over the cliff and it turns into a paraglider and goes off, even though the real boat got stuck at the top of the falls for ages, and then they went back to film and it washed away, so they missed it, so they had to do it all with the model. So they spent all that money and then it got stuck. But, you know, it's amazing what these people do. And it's only as you get older. I grew up as a fan just watching these just for the sheer entertainment and the escapism. And as you get older, you realize how much work goes into these films.
Yeah.
And how professional and amazing these people are, with the likes of Peter Lamont and Keith Hempshire. The people they are the cream of the crop. They are there to entertain us, as Robbie Williams would say, you know, but they are there. They are the ones who are basically putting all of the money that Cubby Broccoli's put in and putting it on the screen. And with the Bond films, you see every penny of it up on the screen.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the beauty about them, you know, and I think that's what really works. So I'm really glad that you said that was your favourite scene, Mary, because it's the kids, and I was really surprised at that. I was really surprised that would be it.
Okay. Well, see, I watched these movies, and I wanted to go to all these places.
Well, I've spent my life trying to do that. So, you know, I went to Istanbul, you know, and stuff like that, and went around, and we stayed in the Blue Mosque and in the hotel looking where the From Russia with Love is. We went, you know, and Emma she goes mad sometimes, but, you know, and I've tended, not, you know, the best one we ever did was Piz Gloria, where I was a photographer for the world's greatest snowboarders, and they did a shoot there, and they were going to film on Piz Gloria, and I was there, and I managed to wangle my way as photographer for it, but we're saving that till the Christmas one, because that has got some great stories.
Yes,
but while we're on snowboarding, it's very worth, you know, mentioning the fact that obviously this is the first time we'd ever seen a snowboard or the front ski of a snowmobile on film. So this film promoted snowboarding hugely. And Willy Bogner has gone on record as saying, this was the first movie to ever publicise the sport. Before this was a cult sport. No one really knew about it. It was between a group of people who were doing it, you know, in France and Switzerland and what have you. This was the first time anyone had been seen skiing. I mean, obviously you had it in a Majesty's Secret Service where he skis on one ski, but that's a ski, not a snowboard, because that's what the front of that is, where it gets blown up at the beginning and he skis down and then over the water.
Wow.
And that was a cute trick. And the thing is, I'm a skier. I like skiing, and I always think about taking up snowboarding, but I don't get to ski very often because Kentucky is not known for its ski slopes. And so I always think about taking up snowboarding because the shoes look really comfortable compared to ski boots. But I don't want to spend my limited time that I have to ski trying to learn how to snowboard.
Yeah.
But watching that scene, even as a kid, I was like, wow, that to me was much more impressive than actual skiing. You know, because it was like he was surfing, and of course they do play the Beach Boys during the scene.
I hate that part.
Which
I love that part. Right,
totally out of the movie when they did that.
Right. Well, you see, you know what I said before, Mary, about how you suspend disbelief. Now, quickly to touch on that, because there's a background story to that. I'm sorry, folks, but hey, you've got me on.
There always is.
Yeah. Well,
go for it.
This is one of my favourite stories about this, and I love this. So basically, you were appalled at the fact that they used the Beach Boys. I was appalled at the fact that they didn't use the Beach Boys. So the band that were playing that are a band called Gidea Park. And it's the only time I know of where the Bond producers faked to fork out the money to use the real song, because the usage rights were so big by Brian Wilson that they didn't use it, and they got this band called Gidea Park to sing it instead.
Oh, wow.
Right? So, lucky as I am, as you know, I got to meet Brian Wilson several times and photographed all of his key concerts for the last, 15 years or so, including Smile and Pet Sounds and what have you. And I got many a time to sit with him on his own and, and talk about stuff. And I told you that story about where he played California Girls because I thought it was going to be a new song and what have you. But it wasn't. And, it's going to be a hit, Brian. But, the fact is that I asked him about that. I said, Brian, why was Gidea Park used at the beginning? Because he's a massive Bond fan, Brian Wilson. He said, he said, they wouldn't pay that. He said, I'm really unhappy about that, but, these things happen. But there's a beautiful thing about that, because we were talking about that, and I said, and I said, Brian, is it true that you wrote the theme for Thunderball? And he said, I did. Wow. And he said, it was never used. And I went, right. I said, could you elaborate? I said, is it the music from Pet Sounds, your most famous album? Is it the instrument? He said, yep. And he said, and I think I've touched on this very briefly before, but he said it was called Run, James, Run. And he said, I was a huge Bond fan, and I sent that to the producers and never heard a thing back from them. Remember, the Beach Boys were huge in 1965.
Yeah.
And he said, so they didn't use it. So basically, I took the instrumental of that, which was called Run, James, Run, and I used it as Pet Sounds, which is obviously voted as either, just above or just below Sgt. Pepper as the greatest album of all time in most lists to this day. So that's a lovely little story. But then I took that story to the guys who did the documentary, which we talked about last time. And I took it to Steve and I said, look, this is the story. This was Brian Wilson. And he confirmed this. And I said it was going to be called Run, James, Run. So up to, quite late in the day, Steve wanted to actually call the documentary Run, James, Run.
Wow.
Because I told him this story that Brian Wilson had told me. And that was the name of the documentary. And then at the end, it was, because we came up with all these relevant, names for the, for the documentary. And of course, one of the first ones we, both Matt and Steve and myself came up with was Everything or Nothing. So that was always on the back boiler. But when I told him the story, he loved that. And he wanted to call the documentary Run, James, Run, meaning the fact that it has run and run and run. And at that point, it was 50 years old. But it was also it was going to be the theme that, from Thunderball. And we were going to hopefully get the rights. And I was going to try and get Brian Wilson. I said, look, if you want to do that, I'll try and get Brian Wilson to be part of the documentary because I know his management. We can talk to him about doing something and what have you. And I was so excited about that. And it never came to fruition. And in the end, they called, Everything or Nothing. But I was beyond excited thinking, I'm going to, and I actually ended up at one point sort of saying, do you think Brian would, I emailed his management and said, do you think he'd just briefly talk about it? And they said, well, let's see what happens down the line when he's not touring and what have you. So, it was there. Aww. So it would have been great had they used it, but hey, Everything or Nothing's still pretty cool. And it stands for Eon, so there you go. That was my little story. So I thought I'd link that in. So yeah, it wasn't Gidea Park. It wasn't Beach Boys, as I say, it was Gidea Park. But that's why the Beach Boys have something to do with the whole thing, including the 50th documentary. And I wish that, part of me wishes that it had been called that.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, okay, I'll say this. That Run, James, Run is a cool title, but I think Everything or Nothing is a better title for that.
Yeah, and it's the name of the company that makes them. Yeah. So
exactly. Yeah. So I think it's fortuitous that in that respect. But wow, if you could have the music and had that would have been wow. Yeah.
Well, if they couldn't get the rights to have the Beach Boys song, how did they get the rights to copy the
Gidea Park's a cover. Because it's a cover. Anyone can use a song, but, Gidea Park are not going to charge. In fact, they'll probably pay the Bond producers to play their song, whereas the Beach Boys at the time, funnily enough, they were doing that massive, they were doing all the gigs in Washington, so they were huge again, because Ronald Reagan was a huge Beach Boys fan, and I think he actually even had Beach Boys Day at that point.
Yeah.
But of course, famously, they didn't do Live Aid, which was just at this time. Because they were unsure, because they were told not to do it, and this, that, and the other, and Dennis Wilson, the band was falling apart, and it was really interesting. So that's a whole nother podcast, but we'll not go into that right now. But yeah, so it's fortuitous that everyone thinks it's the Beach Boys, but it's not.
Yeah, it does. And that's the funny thing. I didn't even bother to look. I just assumed it was the Beach Boys.
Yeah,
And I see what you mean about it taking you out of the scene, Mary, but at the same time, that it fits with that era James Bond.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. This whole movie is very time friendly.
Well, yeah. 80s and you wouldn't have Daniel Craig's James Bond
exactly
doing the snowboarding with the Beach Boys playing.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, at the time, remember, as Mark said, at that time, snowboarding was not a major thing.
I didn't realize
it was a niche thing that was kind of a subculture.
Yeah.
And so the idea that somebody's skiing on this board like a surfboard, and you're getting that wave coming off the bottom of it, and the way you move is very much the way you move on a surfboard. So playing the Beach Boys there was brilliant, and it worked. And part of the reason it worked was nobody'd seen this before.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was very much tongue-in-cheek. It was a nod.
It was.
There so many scenes in the movies preceding that, like Octopussy was just full of gags that didn't work. I actually thought this gag kind of worked. And as I said, just went along with the flow from there on in. And then, of course, you got onto the Duran Duran theme. And, the beauty about it was followed by that. And then he went into the biggest band of the time, which is probably still were. There was obviously big bands like Dire Straits and what have you around. But, Duran Duran, it was the last song they did before they broke up for the first time. And, the reason they got it is because John Taylor was at a party, and it was a big party, and Cubby Broccoli was there. And John Taylor is a James Bond obsessive. He bought one of the Aston Martins from the movies and everything. I mean, he is literally a massive, massive Bond fan. Could tell you any line from any movie or what have you. And he went up to Cubby Broccoli at this dinner party. He said, Cubby, when are you going to get a decent band to write a decent song again for your movies? Ooh. And Cubby Broccoli said, well, why don't you do it? And he said, we will. And they went away and wrote it and came up with it and played it. So it's great that happened, just as simple as that. Cubby Broccoli said, why don't you do it then? And he said, yeah. So he went home, told his daughter, obviously, he said, yeah, Duran Duran are going to do it. So it was brilliant. And then obviously John Barry really liked Duran Duran, and he said, the orchestra, he said they were really fun, unlike Aha, who he couldn't stand, so he really disliked Aha. He thought they were pretentious and just really disliked them. But the Duran Duran he really liked and worked well with. So, and it is, and I love the soundtrack for, as I said, it's slow in parts, but it's got the wonderful thing like Wine with Stacey. If you ever get a chance to put that little bit of music on, because that's the music I mentioned in the jukebox and everything, it's the B-side of the record. It's called Wine with Stacey or That Fatal Kiss. There's 2 versions of it on the soundtrack, Nick. It's a great piece of music to play. But, so it's a great, and as I said, you're right, Mary, it encapsulated the time. And when that came out, literally, probably a month later, was Live Aid. So it was the zenith when it came to music and that 80s vibe and feel.
I guess it just didn't have that orchestra kind of thing. But
it was at the time, it was,
exactly.
But it still stands up today. I really do think that song stands up today. And of course,
I love this. Did they write that song specifically for this movie?
So, say it again, Mary, sorry?
Did they write that song specifically for this movie?
Oh, yes, of course, yeah. Well, that's what it says. You're meeting you with a view to a kill.
Yeah, I do.
That's the first line. But what is interesting is the fact that, little known to them, that the Danish title, when the movie came out in Finland, the Danish title for it was 007 Into the Fire, before they even knew that. So it was quite interesting. But, the Dance Into the Fire, he came up with the lyrics.
Yeah.
Nick had come up with a tune. And then, Simon Le Bon said, meeting you with a view to a kill. And Simon Le Bon wrote some great poetry. I mean, he wrote The Chauffeur when he was 14 years old.
Wow.
And The Chauffeur is, the second to last song, or the last song on Rio. And it's Sing Blue Silver. It's one of the greatest songs they ever did. The whole of the B-side of, Rio is a masterpiece. And it takes away from the fact that you always have that saying, the second, the most difficult record is always the second record. Duran Duran's second album was Rio, which is one of the best records of the 80s, in my humble opinion. But
it's great.
I think it's a masterpiece. I've actually, lucky enough, they came to Susie and the Banshees were running a concert, and Nick Taylor and Nick Rhodes and Andy Taylor were there with their girlfriends, and I had my badge on, and I just went up to them and talked about A View to a Kill and, music. They were the loveliest people, and then I got them to pause for me on this balcony. It was awesome, and it's a thrill to me, being a huge Duran Duran fan. And for Christmas, I got I got to know the guy's promoter. I got to know the guy who promoted all the shows, and I got for my Christmas. Emma bought it for me. I got Rio signed by the band from the time, from 1980s.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so I've got that in amongst my signed albums. So it's one of my favourites. I really love Rio. I think it's a wonderful album for, Save a Prayer. One of the great lines of all time. Some people call it a one-night stand, but we can call it paradise. You can't get any more 80s than that one line.
That is.
Guilty Feet have got no rhythm. That's another one. But there you go.
Yeah.
But hey, and you know what? They're great lines. And I'm just thinking, you put the two together and you've pretty much summed up most evenings for some people.
Exactly.
But Oh. Okay. So, what?
I've lost track of what we're doing now.
Well, we've been talking about. Okay, we were talking about the locations. We've been talking about the movie for the Bond films. Let's talk about who's in this Bond film, because we do have a great cast. I know we've already briefly mentioned, that Patrick Macnee was in it as Sir Godfrey Tibbett, and as Mark said, he's one of the most lovable, I guess what I would call Bond assistants, because he's always got somebody that's his assistant in these.
Yeah. And Corinne Bay out of From Russia with Love and Patrick Macnee are the two, apart from Felix Leiter, of course, they're the two that most people really do love. Corinne Bay from Russia with Love and Pedro Almendaraz is such a wonderful actor. Now, we might as well touch on that. It's an incredible story because the guy who played, if you watch this, Mary, from Russia with Love, which will be the next one because you just watched Dr. No recently, the guy who plays, this part he was literally dying of cancer. And he took the role because he needed money to support his family. So the Bond guys filmed all of his scenes before anything else because he didn't, he was losing all of his strength at the time when he was playing Corinne Bay. And he was a wonderful actor. He's wonderful in that role. And him and Connery have this wonderful playing off against each other. They are wonderful together. And Corinne Bay literally finished his last scene and went into hospital. And Fleming knew this, and he was very sad, but he'd heard about it before. And Fleming knew what had happened, which was the fact that the actor, he said he didn't want the waste away, so he'd taken a gun into the hospital and killed himself, not long after that film was finished. And when you watch it again, it brings such a pathos to the whole thing, because he didn't want to just fade away. And he says, everyone's his son in this movie. And he's such a larger-than-life character. You can imagine he was like that in real life. And I know Connery really liked him as a person as well. And so did Fleming. So it's interesting that. And then obviously you've got Tibbett, who's incredibly likable. And that goes to the fact that Roger Moore and Patrick Macnee go way back. And of course, Patrick Macnee was an iconic hero in himself with Steed.
Oh yeah.
I always loved that. Did you actually know? And I only found this out a few years ago, and I love this bit of trivia. Do you know why Daniel Rigg was called M. Appeal?
No, why?
M. Appeal, man appeal.
Oh wow!
How cool is that?
Wow.
That is so 1960s.
Isn't it? I love it. I think it's so cool.
Okay, that sounds more like she ought to be an agent working on in one of the Armand Flint movies.
Yeah. yeah. Then again, you got Jenny Flex in this, so it's this.
Yeah, well, that's true. And but you almost always had somebody with a female character with an interesting name, and I mean, I really think Pussy Galore in Goldfinger was the one that started that the most.
Yeah.
Before that, it was a
Holly
little
Goodhead.
Yeah, Holly Goodhead, Jenny Flex, Plenty O'Toole.
Yeah,
I mean
as we said.
they just go on.
13-year-old boys.
And
they're all great.
13-year-old boys buy movie tickets too, Mary.
That's true. That's true.
They're trying to have something for everybody. So.
Yeah,
but
I'm glad you said something about Patrick Macnee's father being a horse person, a horse trainer.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he was so good in those scenes where he was walking through the paddocks and petting the horses. He was so comfortable with those horses.
Yeah, you can tell when someone has an affinity with horses, the way he is with them, the way he approached them and everything. So obviously, his background, his life had basically been revolved around those. So you can tell when someone, has seen a horse and someone who hasn't really.
Yeah. Like he wasn't afraid of them. He was petting them. No. And it was I love that part.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I did read where he was an avid nudist in real life.
Who, Patrick Macnee?
Uh-huh.
No.
Yeah.
Not Tibbett. Oh, I can't imagine. Is that why he always had that bowler hat? To keep his lunch in?
Well, I heard that Winston Churchill was also an avid nudist.
Wow.
So it's always the people that you don't want to be nudists, I think, that want to be nudists. So.
Okay, I also read that Honor Blackman claimed that he once invited her to play tennis in the nude.
God, blimey. So obviously,
okay, but did she accept?
If you missed it, he had a second chance.
Declined.
She declined?
She declined.
That's her loss.
I must admit, when she was young, I'd like to have seen, her.
Well, I guess he would too. So.
Yeah. Well, it's quite good though, because obviously, if you missed it with the racket, he could always have a second shot. He shook himself in the right way.
Wow.
Get the ball back over the net.
I'm just going to let that one hang.
Yeah.
There's that wonderful story, isn't there? There's that wonderful story about two old nudists sitting on a bench and in a nude colony.
Yeah.
And they're sitting there, and they've been trying to persuade one of their friends to go nude, and she finally does, and she goes, right. So these two old guys are sitting there, and she walks past them, and they look up and they go, is that Jenny? And they haven't got their glasses on. And he says, I think it was Jenny. He said, what's she wearing? He said, I don't know, but it needs ironing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Bump.
Oh, God. Oh, God. All right. Well, all right.
I guess McNee didn't like all the carnage in the movie either.
Is that right?
Yeah, because he seems in World War II.
The interesting thing is on the making ofs and all the Blu-rays and the DVDs, he actually does the voiceover. So he's the commentator on all of the making ofs on every Bond movie. Obviously, bar A View to a Kill, because he's in it.
Yeah.
So he can't talk about himself. So he's the only one. It's the only one where it doesn't have Patrick Macnee talking about the Bond films in there. So he's the commentator right away through on all the other movies.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, now, we've talked a little bit also about Grace Jones and Christopher Walken, but we haven't really touched on the main Bond girl in this one.
Yeah, and
okay.
Mary.
I know.
No, she's fabulous. And tragically, I can't believe we're sitting here and she's not with us anymore.
I know. She passed away just last year.
About that, the weirdness about it, that she was reported dead and she wasn't, and then did die.
Yeah.
The whole thing was strange, but a lot of people say, "Oh, she's a typical Bond girl." No, she's great in it. She looks fantastic. I think she's wonderful, and she's perfect for the role. Yeah, she may be a geologist. If only we looked at but look at Denise Richardson. She's the same thing, and Dr. Christmas Jones. There's another one for you.
Yes, I was going to say.
She's far better than Dr. Christmas Jones. I really like Tanya Roberts in this, and I think she looks great.
I think I wanted a stronger person. I'd rather have had Grace Jones do it.
She's perfect. No, I think she's great for it. And she's typically, this is the most 80s movie. Tanya Roberts is the most 80s Bond girl.
That's true.
Yeah.
It fits perfectly.
Yeah.
No, it hits the nail on the head. And, the last couple of Bond girls, when you had The Spy Who Loved Me, you had Moonraker, both of those lead Bond girls were very strong. They were the tough bad characters. Barbara it was Barbara Bach in Spy Who Loved Me. She was a Russian agent, a top Russian agent who was kind of considered Bond's equal. And so there was that. So it was okay that not every single one of the leads was a chomping at the bit badass. It's okay. So she's a geologist. And to be fair, they actually used the fact that she was a geologist a couple of times. They really never used much of Denise Richards' I'm a nuclear scientist, stuff with, but they kind of used it, and it made sense with the way that, the ultimate evil plan, which, is to flood Silicon Valley, which, by the way, everybody, I was watching this and you started saying about how much like Goldfinger it was. And I actually noticed that while I was watching it, and the bit that really made me think of Goldfinger more than the plot was when they're in the blimp and Zorin raises up the little model of Silicon Valley.
Yeah, just like the model in Goldfinger where it flips over,
Just like the model in Goldfinger.
Yeah. I love that scene. I think it's a wonderful scene.
And I do too. And the thing is, I also think I want to be a supervillain where I have so many resources laying around that instead of just using an aerial photo, I will bring up a 3D model that I've had built and put into a table in my blimp just for this scene. I mean, think just logistically, all the stuff he had to go through to put I have a hard time putting together a PowerPoint for a meeting. And this guy's got, all right, well, we're going to build, I want a 3D model of Silicon Valley. Bring me a bag of microchips. I've got to dramatically throw them out there. Let's make sure the little door's open, even if the microchips are on there. I don't want anything jamming because, it'll look bad to the investors, okay? And, this is, I mean, just wow. So,
yeah, but it's great. But at the time, I loved that because I learned something from it because these are microchips and they are made from sand. I didn't know that, so that's another thing about the Bond films. You think, are they really made from sand?
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah. I love the fact that they look into that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, and it was a good scene, and, this whole, and at the end of the day, it's not a terrible idea if you wanted to decimate a certain industry. Let's do this natural disaster. Now,
well, Superman had tried it, hadn't he? You talked about Lex Luthor before. Superman, the first Superman, Christopher Reeve, it's kind of similar to that, isn't it? Because you mentioned Lex Luthor, and I thought, when you said that, I thought, actually, that's really like Superman, the whole San Francisco thing where they're trying to go around the timeline and everyone's going to fall in on itself.
Yep. So let's see. We had Lex Luthor was trying to knock half of California into the ocean.
That's right.
So that he would have all the beachfront property. And Zorn was trying to knock a part of California into the ocean so that he could dominate the world microchip industry.
Yeah.
And by the way, is it not ironic that the whole plot here is to dominate the microchip industry when right now one of the biggest problems that everybody's having shortages is because of microchip shortages?
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It kind of lines up because I work in the auto industry, and there's a whole lot of manufacturers who are not building cars right now because they can't get all the microprocessors to run the computers.
I read they're actually changing the insides of the newer cars to not have as many electronics in there because they can't do it now. They can't get the chips.
That's crazy. They're trying to consolidate. Okay, let's take that statement back a little bit.
Okay.
The electronics are staying the same level. What they're trying to do is use fewer microprocessors to run it all.
Okay.
Okay, they're trying to use fewer chips, but trust me, nobody wants to go backwards. Now, on your lower-priced vehicles, there's a move to go backwards on those.
Yeah.
Because on top of everything else, it's just super expensive to have any kind of work done on a car now. Because everything's got microprocessing power tied into it.
I know.
And so, you've got all these different things.
Hybrids.
But, wow. And somehow I've taken us down let's go to...
It's all right. It's okay. That was fascinating.
Job.
No, that was fascinating. I learned a lot from that. That's really interesting. But it's funny. Back to Tanya Roberts.
Okay.
What is great about it, because she was obviously picked for this movie in The Beastmaster, and wasn't that one of the movies that what was that line you used to always say, Nick, about the Beastmaster?
Beastmaster's on. It was on HBO, and HBO stood for, Beastmaster's on.
Yeah, because that was HBO. Yeah, that's right. I remember that. That's such a great line. But she was great in The Beastmaster.
Yeah. Oh, no, she was brilliant in that. And, I want to say that she did, so she did The Beastmaster. She did, View to a Kill. I want to say that she did her Playboy pictorial as part of the promotion for Beastmaster.
Oh.
Yes, she did. But I think there was also some for View to a Kill, I think. There's a few Playboys out there, yeah.
Yeah. And then she did Sheena, Queen of the Jungle the year before she did View to a Kill also.
Yeah.
And again, she was really very iconic in the 80s as a kind of a sex symbol. And it was funny because she was sort of a B-movie sex symbol, even though the budgets of the films were A-level budgets. Like, Sheena, Queen of the Jungle was a studio pick. And, Beastmaster was a studio pick, but it was a lower-end studio pick. But Sheena, Queen of the Jungle had a bit of money behind it. And then, of course, she did this. And, she's fun. And I remember her most, though, from a movie called Tourist Trap, which was...
Oh, yeah, that's the horror film. Yeah, with the doll, the sort of the mannequins.
Yes, exactly, with Chuck Connors as a psychotic guy who owns a roadside attraction.
Do you know, I've never seen that movie, Nick. I'd love to see that.
You need to check it out. It is worth checking out. It's disturbing.
I really want to see it because I've seen so many clips from it. Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, that's she's in that, and I think she's a pretty good character in that. But I think she went on to be in That 70s Show, playing the mom of the main character's love interest who lived next door.
She's in Charlie's Angels.
Well, yeah, she was the last angel.
Yeah.
In Charlie's Angels, right when I think she was there the very last season of that. So, I mean, she had
maybe I wanted her to look sexier in this because I'm used to the Bond girls being extremely
oh my word.
sexy.
Seriously?
Okay,
yeah. She's super sexy in this.
She seemed like the girl next door to me in this.
Okay, you know what?
I wish. Blimey. The girl next door who has a tattoo. Like that.
Mary, I'm going to say you just lost some points with Fiona there on. I think she needed to look sexier in the Bond film.
I did. She just, I don't know.
I thought she looked great.
I don't know. She come across as that hot, sexy Bond woman to me.
Okay.
Grace Jones did to me, but not.
Well, Grace Jones was amazing in this, but okay.
I thought Grace Jones was so androgynous at the time. I thought she was fascinating.
Yeah,
Tanya Roberts to me was like super cool. There's that wonderful scene where they're in the mine and this was written as a joke because Tanya Roberts had complained about everything not fitting her properly and it looked really baggy. So they'd done this tailored suit for her, and so when she pulled it on, Roger Moore turns around and goes, "Could you not find one that fits?" It's wonderful, and that kind of sums up the whole Stacey Sutton thing. But the fact that she's got that house and she's sold everything, and and I love that line where they're having the fight in the house. And this is one of the only movies, in fact, it probably is the only movie where you see James Bond cook, which I quite like.
True.
I like that little bit.
Yeah.
But the bit where the granddad's ashes come out and she smacks him across the head and she says, "Oh," he said, "What was that?" And she said, "Granddad's ashes, but he always did like a good fight." I love lines like that. I think it's great.
By the way, I thought it was funny that right after she said that, she kind of wipes her hands on her dress. It's like, okay, Granddad.
Yeah, I know.
Here you go. But, okay, one thing you brought up and I love that line, "Oh, couldn't you find something that fits?" when she's in the jumpsuit. Yeah, but, right. Okay, later on, they're climbing up the mine shaft, and Grace Jones, Mayday, grabs her leg and starts ripping she's trying to pull her down, but she ends up ripping the jumpsuit. And I started laughing because I had noticed that her full dress is on under the jumpsuit.
I know.
And I'm just like,
taking that off,
but you clearly see she's wearing this ultra tight jumpsuit earlier. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, her dress is on under that. Okay, sure. But no, she was fun in it. And it is sad that she passed recently, and and it's funny because you brought up the the way that they misannounced that she had passed, and it wasn't really a coincidence. The misannouncement was simply because she had been hospitalized and was in such poor condition that the hospital had actually told the family that she was going to pass in the next couple hours. And so that's how it leaked out.
Yeah, her publicist said she was dead, didn't they?
Yeah, he announced her death.
I saw the things coming onto Instagram saying, "No, she's not dead. It's been mis." And I thought, "Oh, that's really good that she's not." And then the next morning she was. It was just like, real.
And it wasn't a coincidence though. It was just mistiming.
Yeah.
Because they'd said she wouldn't last the night, and the publicist just went ahead and was devastated. And these people were very devastated by her passing. These weren't just people she worked with. These were friends and family. And they went ahead and announced it, and then she just didn't pass then. It was delayed by about 36 hours.
What did she die from?
Oh, she
I
had...
think it was some kind of blood poisoning, wasn't it? Or something?
Yeah, she had sepsis.
Sepsis, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, she got a blood infection from a urinary... Okay, she had a urinary tract infection, and it went septic, and she got sepsis that entered into her bloodstream.
Wow.
And then that led to organ failure and hepatitis C. So, it was really sad. And her health declined very fast. That's the thing. This was not a long-term
She was out walking the dog the day before.
Yeah.
And then just collapsed. It's just, these things happen, as we know.
So she's 70-something years old.
She was 66.
Oh, okay.
That's young.
So she wasn't 70-something years old, Mary. And you say that like that automatically means a death sentence.
No, I'm thinking I'm still seeing her as the age she's had in the movie, and I'm going, wow, it's weird to die from that at such a young age. But
because she was one of the younger Bond girls as well, that's why it was a shock when it happened, And she lived longer than, not actually she died the same year as Honor Blackman and stuff. And we've touched on that before, how strange that is, that on the poster of Goldfinger, Connery died, the girl who played the Golden Girl in the poster died, and Honor Blackman died, all within relevant, successive months.
Yeah.
So it's surreal to see that. But so many were lost from the Bond fraternity last year, like including Peter Lamont, as we the great set designer.
Yeah.
So many we lost, and the first Bond girl. And it's tragic, really. But of course, we're talking about Tanya Roberts and Sheena and everything, Nick. Which other cult actor of the 80s appears, albeit very briefly, in this film?
Oh, wait, in this film, who is it? Oh, I don't know. Who?
It was Grace Jones's boyfriend of the time, Mr. Dolph Lundgren.
Wait, he's in this? He's
the Russian guy where they go at the races, and he goes, "You're a physiological freak." And the bit where Grace Jones picks the guy up and throws him down, the agent that goes down and points the gun and stands behind him, it's Dolph Lundgren. And Grace Jones said, "Please put my boyfriend into this film because he's really good looking and he looks Russian." So that's exactly what they did. And on that one tiny scene, he got Rocky V.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Wow.
And that is actually very awesome, I'm going to have to say.
I thought that would appeal to you in an 80s geek, mate.
Oh, yeah. That way appeals to my inner 80s geek, because I used to love Dolph Lundgren. Well, I still love Dolph Lundgren. Yeah. He's gotten better with age, in my opinion.
I will break you. You've got to love Dolph. Even then, that Expendables thing, he's great. He's one of the best in that by a long shot.
And the funny thing about the guy is he is super intelligent.
Yeah,
but he always he used to play these characters that are just kind of, I'm just the big guy and I'm kind of dumb. And he's like a kickboxing champion and all this. And so to me, he's one of the action stars that is A, underrated, but B, really brings. He doesn't have to be made an action star. He kind of is an action star, and they just put a camera on him. But, okay, I have a lot of love for Dolph Lundgren, in case you guys couldn't tell.
And this is his first movie.
And this is, so I'm very excited by this, actually.
And the other one, which is sort of, it's gone down in Bond law, is that Maud Adams is one of the only women to ever appear in two movies. Obviously, she was in Man with the Golden Gun,
right?
As is one of the main roles in there, along with Britt Eklund. And then she was Octopussy.
Yeah.
And then she went to see, because Roger Moore's favourite Bond girl is Maud Adams, and always was. He loved Maud Adams.
Oh.
And they were very friendly. And Maud Adams had gone to San Francisco to have lunch with Roger and his then wife Louisa. And she was sitting there, and they thought, wouldn't it be a fun thing if Octopussy was walking around in the background when we go down to Fisherman's Wharf, which is the next scene we're going to film, which was the first time, as you quite rightly said, it's the first point of San Francisco you see. Wouldn't it be fun if Maud Adams, if you, Octopussy, were walking around down there? And so they let her. So she is part of the background, but I'm blowed if I can find her. So if anyone out there wants to spend the time to look, please do, and let us know, because I'd love to try and find her, because I've looked and I can't see her. But she's gone on record saying, "Yep, absolutely me." And when we had the big reunion for Roger's thing, that she said, "Yep, I definitely did that, and I went down and I walked around the crowd, and John Glenn said, just mill amongst the crowd and see if anyone spots you." So it's definitely true.
That's awesome.
Wow. I can't believe you couldn't find her.
I can't see her.
Mark.
I've looked many times and I can't see her.
I was going to say, it may be that you just can't see her in a shot that she's in, but she's still there. So, but whatever the case, she was there. Everybody knows it, so it counts.
Yes.
You know, I mean, okay. You know, Vin Diesel's the voice of Groot, and he still gets all that credit, and all he says is Groot.
Yeah, unbelievable.
So, you know, yeah. Sorry, I just wonder how much he got paid for just saying Groot.
Quite frightening.
Sorry, yeah. Oh,
it's worth mentioning. We're mentioning stars, but another star, which isn't an actor, but is another person that we lost this year, is the stunt guy Remy Julien, who did all of the amazing stuff in the Citroen, where it spins around, goes down the stairs, launches up the pad, lands on top of the bus, the car gets smashed in half. That's all him. He was an absolute genius, Remy Julien, and he did amazing stunts for many, many years in many movies, and he's well worth a mention. I just thought I should mention him.
I was going to say, he's the one that coordinated the corkscrew jump in the oh God,
Man with the Golden Gun.
Man with the Golden Gun.
No, that was all done. That was all done by a computer company.
Was it?
Yeah. That was all
that's
worked
right.
out on computer.
Yeah.
It was the first ever computer simulated jump, and they worked out on a computer, which is the first time it had ever happened, that they could do it at what angle and what speed, and it was all worked out. What angle you had to hit it, what speed you had to hit it, and they worked it out on a Texas Instruments computer, and then it was done. So yeah,
because I'll say that's one of my favorite car stunts of all time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The only thing that spoils it for me is why did John Barry put that ridiculous whistle on there? Yeah, it's one bit of John Barry I've never quite understood, but it goes and it goes over like that, and I thought, well, it takes away from it, you know.
Yeah.
But there you go. But no, it is one of the great stunts, and all real, which is great. No CGI.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, you watch the Fast and the Furious movies now. Going back to my seeming obsession with Vin Diesel, but you go back to the Fast and Furious movies, and they do stuff with cars there that, you know, physics, it's like Newton just is Newton is not rolling over in his grave. He's tunneling.
They are great fun. Yeah, they are great fun, but you can't work out what's real and what's not.
Oh, God,
and it's like watching a computer game. And that kind of spoils it for me, because I think I would love to think that was real, and I know a lot of it is, but you're trying to work out what is and what isn't. I mean, obviously some of them, they're so blatantly silly that it couldn't be. But talking about videos and the way things look, this was also the first Bond film to ever have a video game produced for it as well. GoldenEye was the most famous.
Yeah.
But there was one made for Octopussy, which was never released, because I don't think it ever came out in time, or something wrong with it. I'm not sure. But this was the first ever Bond film to have a video game, and this is 1985, so quite early.
So it would have been a video game similar to Oregon Trail, I think.
It would have been very basic. It would have been very basic, yeah.
By the way, I just threw an Easter egg there for any classic video game fans would know Oregon Trail. It's just a text-based game that they used to play on DOS computers back in the day, but I'm really showing my age now.
No, that's a lovely bit of thing, because it's all about computers, isn't it? This movie's all about computers, so we've got to have some computer stuff in there, Nick.
I do love that Tanya Roberts has this little terminal, and I believe it was an Apple terminal in her bedroom.
Yeah,
and
seismic waves.
Yeah, he's just like, ooh, we had the earthquake. Let me go check the seismic wave computer that I have over here, and it's apparently linked up to the California Institute of
But that was
Geology.
so impressive at the time, though. We all went, "Oh, wow, that's cool."
Yeah, and what was really impressive was that she just turned it on, and the info was right there.
Yeah.
To me, all I could think of was, okay, 4 hours after it's done booting up and connecting.
Exactly.
Yeah, where's the dial-up modem noise?
Yeah, where's that noise? Yeah, make it back. It was great.
I like when Christopher Walken put in James Bond on the computer.
Yeah, that's what I love that scene. Yeah, I mentioned that earlier. I love that scene.
Yeah.
And the bit where he freezes him, it's great.
Yeah.
But that's when I say, his reactions where he's laughing. It says, normally armed, very dangerous. And it's great.
I guess I wanted more of those bits in there, though.
Yeah, and this goes back to, I know you didn't think he was crazy enough. I thought that Christopher Walken brought exactly the right amount of crazy.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
I really did. By the way, can we just throw this out there? This is, to me, okay, there's more stuff going on in this Bond film than most, not because of any kind of world-dominating plot or whatever, but what you've got is Zorin, the character, is a product of Nazi genetic experimentation.
Yeah. He is one of the boys from Brazil.
And you've got a Nazi doctor.
Yeah.
So what you have is Nazis working with the KGB, creating this super industrialist
He is the Aryan race with his blonde hair and everything. So he is just exactly what the boys from Brazil had touched on in 1974.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
Yeah, he's one of the boys from...
I wanted that Superman feel from him because of that. I wanted him to be... I mean, he was supposedly super strong, incredibly intelligent, could, forecast. I mean, he knew everything. And I didn't get that feeling from the movie.
See, I did get okay. I don't think super strong. We're not talking about Captain America level strength.
Yeah.
But his character, he was sparring with Grace Jones as a form of foreplay.
Yeah.
And, to me, that's okay, starting off right there, that kind of puts you a notch or two above your normal dude.
Yeah.
Okay, sparring with Grace Jones as foreplay, and then getting the best of her. At one point.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, this is the girl who picks up, the Russian agent and throws him down at the racetrack. So she's
pretty.
She gets hold of the horse and pulls the horse reins in.
Yeah.
And of course, there's that wonderful line where, I bet she takes a lot of vitamins.
Yeah.
Right, just the fact that the horse is actually getting the vitamins, which is interesting.
Which also, okay, I'm going to say, being from Kentucky and kind of around the horse racing and horse breeding industry, there's no way he was getting away with doping those horses. But just the way they behaved after the race would raise so many red flags that... But again, suspension of disbelief for a Bond film.
But that's why Goldfinger's your favorite Bond movie, isn't it? Because it's set in Kentucky. Yeah,
it is, and you're laughing. Goldfinger is actually, it's in my top 3.
Wow.
And
Goldfinger's one of the definitive Bond movies.
Yeah.
It looks amazing. They hit the ground running with this one.
Yep, that's when they really had the Bond.
Yeah.
They had Bond figured out. Yeah, they had him figured
the
out.
movie that launched it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The first two are thrillers. Goldfinger is a Bond film.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it, actually. But yeah, and speaking of Grace Jones, I mean, we've talked about her for a bit, but she really is a very strong presence in this. Mm-hmm. And I like the fact that even though she's a villain, other than the fact that she has a penchant for hiding in the back seat of James Bond's friends' cars and killing them, she really, she's not the psychotic killer that, I get the impression she's not the psychotic killer that, Zorin is. Now, that said, anybody who knew what Zorin's plot was and was willingly going along with him, okay, those guys are kind of, that's on edge. And what I think's interesting is I don't believe that most of the workers in the mine actually knew what they were doing.
No.
None of them did. Not even the guy who was doing it. That Texan guy, he didn't know what they were doing at all. He thought they were just because they put the bombs in later, and they could have just been for excavating because you use dynamite and everything when you're blowing up, for mines and stuff like this, and for when you're getting slate or rocks out or what have you. So I don't think any of them. You're right, Nick. None of the crew knew what they were doing, and that's why their innocence being slaughtered. That's the thing that Roger Moore hated. But there's also that thing where, like Jaws, you see Mayday turn on her head, and she goes, and I thought that creep loved me, and then she helps James Bond. So she's like the villain who becomes a goodie, and all the way along you think, was she just brainwashed into this by, being led as because I don't think he'd actually told Mayday everything,
No, and I think she was genuinely in love with him.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, and then she figures out real quick, well, he's just... he's killed my partners, he's killed Jenny Flex and oh God, the other character's name, which wasn't as memorable as Jenny Flex. So I just,
Scar, you're talking.
Yeah. And he's killed. He's killing all of us.
No, he got away with Scar.
I was thinking the other female hench person.
Oh, the other female. Oh, the Jenny Wu, the Chinese girl. Yeah, Jenny Wu. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That
Peng
was
Su
her.
something or something.
Yeah. Pan Ho, I think. Yeah.
Pan Ho. Yeah.
Yeah, that was it. But Pan Ho and Jenny Flex both bought it, and that really, really upset. She sees Jenny Flex dead.
Yeah.
And it really upsets her character.
Well, the way she acts that, where she goes, "Oh, Jenny, it's a wonderful scene," and you really do feel for her. And your whole, approach to Mayday and what she is changes at that moment, because the absolute hurt that you hear and the way she's really good, Grace Jones. She's great.
That's it. And anybody who gives her, there's this whole thing, by the way, online about one of the posters where it has Roger Moore and her back to back.
Yeah.
And Roger Moore's
James
taller
finally
than
met
her.
his match, yeah.
Yeah. And, for the record, in bare feet, Roger Moore was 2.5 inches taller than Grace Jones.
Really? Yeah, actually, Nick, that's a perfect way to start, because this is the last Bond film to have the classic treble poster, like you had in You Only Live Twice, like Thunderball had, several images. View to a Kill has some of the best poster artwork of the entire series. You've got the one that you mentioned, which is Grace Jones and Roger back-to-back, has James Bond finally met his match. She's so iconic that's the only time you actually see a villain like that alongside Bond like that on any poster. Then you've got probably my favourite of the lot, which is the one that's used the least, where he's hanging off the Eiffel Tower at dusk, and Mayday's coming behind him and using a stiletto shoe to try and stab him in the back on a parachute.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant poster. And then you've got the other one, which is the Golden Gate Bridge poster, which is great. But one of the keystones of my collection, and there's a few come onto the market of late, but the story behind this, which I'll quickly touch on, back in 1985, when I was in the James Bond fan club, and I was number 0038, so shows how, I took it up quite early.
Wow.
I loved it, and the guy who ran it, a guy called Graham Rye, said that there was a poster which was going to be discontinued because Cubby Broccoli hated it so much, and they were going to be trashed, and that he had 15 copies of this poster. And would I be interested in it? And, of course, I loved View to Kill, so I sent it off, and this was, something I had to have. And it was a poster which is now quite famous, and it's by Vic Fair, and it's a beautiful poster where James Bond's in a white tuxedo with the point in the gun, and Grace Jones is like in this really Art Deco purple look behind him. Mm-hmm. It's probably one of my all-time favourite James Bond posters. Cubby Broccoli thought it was far too effeminate. He looked too effeminate in it and wanted it destroyed. So those were withdrawn. There's a few cropped up of late, but I've got one of the original ones, and I love it. And it's one of the ones I don't put up because I want to keep it really nice. But, one day I'm going to put it up. But I love that poster. So, yeah, it's worth touching on the fact that you mentioned the poster, Nick, because this has, as a movie campaign, along with The Unlit Twice, the best poster campaign of any Bond, I personally think. I truly love it. And I think it's the best of any of the... the Roger Moore years. I mean, Moonraker's got some classics. Don't get me wrong. That's got the three that were used. But by the time Pure Eyes Only came out, it was the one of Roger Moore with the legs, shooting through the legs, and that was used in again 3 different versions. But they were great. But then when it got to the next movie after this, The Living Daylights was the last painted Bond poster. And after that, it's all collage. So License to Kill is all photos, and we've never changed from that ever since. Obviously, you get the Ultimo, and you get the classic posters now, which are painted by fans for special showings of these things. And the painted poster is now very much coming back to the fore, which is wonderful to see. But for years, we had to put up with just like 3 heads in a row, or put in different places, which was so boring. And even the Bond posters weren't great. And the ones for like Skyfall and stuff, I just thought, wow, God, you had such iconic posters. What is going on? It's a shame. But yeah, this was one of the last movies to use the 3 great poster techniques.
And see, you said that, and now that you've said that, it's kind of clicked into my head about that. And yeah, and I do love the fact, by the way, that now a lot of films are getting a lot of classic films that had a less than iconic poster, perhaps, are now getting the painted poster treatment.
Well, the Ultimate Draft House, that cinema, which I think you've been to, Nick, and you've been to a couple of these. They're the ones who started off, and now Mondo Movies and everything.
Mm-hmm.
They really are a huge. The fact there's a huge documentary about it as well. Called,
I need to find that.
Yeah, which is really great. All about these new posters, the alternative movie poster, and it's become an art form in itself. And some of these posters that have been redone are worth more than some of the original posters you can get. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the look at the one, the American Werewolf in London art poster that you sent me.
Yeah.
That is stunning.
It's incredible, yeah.
I mean, all the stuff that it has worked into it for that film. I mean, it's mind-boggling. But, all right. Well, okay.
I actually didn't realize there was a difference. I didn't.
What do you mean?
I never realized how different the posters were made. I just.
You only live twice. You've got one of them hanging over the volcano. You've got one of them in Little Nelly, the helicopter. You've got one of them in the bath. View to a Kill has those three, and then the one that was taken off the market. Moonraker had him standing there with Holly Goodhead lying on him and Jaws coming to him. He also had one of them taking off from the earth. I mean, they are wonderful, wonderful posters. They are great. The one thing about the Bond movies, which was fantastic at this time, were the posters. And, they are my main thing. I love to collect those. I mean, I've got obviously all my science fiction movies and what have you, but when it comes to great posters, Emma would quite happily see me sell anything in my collection, but she said the one thing that you should never sell is your Bond posters because I like those.
Yeah.
So that says it all, really, and that's coming from an artist.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Like I said, I didn't realize that they changed from painted to something else.
Yes, sadly, yeah. And the last few have just been not very good. Of course, the ones, quickly, I know we're running short of time, Nick, but quickly worth mentioning, if anyone ever gets the chance to get any of the No Time to Die posters from 2020 or 2019, snap them up, because obviously the dates never happened.
Oh,
so
yeah.
When you get those, I went to my local cinema and I bought literally all of the ones. I couldn't believe it. So I said, I'm going to give you some money for charity, and they gave me all of the posters for the 3 different releases that were put back. So I was chuffed beyond belief, and they're really, really collectible now.
Yeah.
Wasn't Grace Jones supposed to be in that movie?
Sorry?
Wasn't Grace Jones supposed to be in that movie?
Yes, she was. She was supposed to be in. She was supposed to be in it, but turned it down. Yeah.
That's too bad. But well. Anyway, okay. So off of posters, back to the film.
Beauchamp.
Do what? Who?
Beauchamp. Patrick Beauchamp. He was Scarpine.
Scarpine, he's a great Scar, yeah.
He's wonderful.
Yeah, he's wonderful. Wasn't he in Nikita or something like that as well? I think he's in a Luc Besson film, I remember him.
I was going to say, I think he's been in a couple of Luc Besson films because he's French. But, he was in Le Film Publique.
All right, okay.
Yeah, which is not.
I thought it was Nikita he was in. Oh, it was called The Body. What was it called? The Professional over there, wasn't it? It was called something different in America.
Oh, was he in The Professional? Hang on.
The Professional is Nikita over here, and it's called The Professional in America. And I think he's in that. I'm not sure 100%, but I showed that to Mauve recently. She truly, truly loved it.
Yeah. Okay.
I remember him in The Pretender, the movie series.
Was he in The Pretender too?
Yeah, the TV series.
Yeah. I knew what you meant.
Yeah. and one woman who won't be as famous over there as what she is here was the lady who was Eva Polanova, which was the girl he ended up in the jacuzzi with, and that is Fiona Fullerton, and she was in a movie a program over here called Angels and what have you, and she was very, very well known, and she's stunning, she's great. And she's in such a small role, so Pola over and over. And they've obviously had a history there and end up in the bath together. And she tells wonderful stories about how they spent 9.5 hours shooting that scene, and they came out and they were both like dried prunes. But she said, she said the first time ever I was there, I was, semi-naked sitting with Roger Moore. But she was a big star over here because of that TV program, and probably not as well known over there.
I was going to say she really didn't have much over here other than this, but she was in I don't know, Shaka Zulu, which did get the TV version, which got a release over here, but I don't really know her from anything over here other than this. But she did make an impression.
Oh yeah. All even over. I just love it.
But and we talked. I mean, we've kind of hit on everybody, even Christopher Walken, who, by the way, I think Christopher Walken is one of those guys that I would just like to have a beer with.
Oh, yeah. Tell me.
You know, because that guy, he's just going to be fun and have the fun stories to tell. Mm-hmm. And I'm like you, that monologue he does with Dennis Hopper in True Romance is just, that is an iconic piece of film right there.
It's acting class in 6 minutes, basically. Yeah. It's a year's worth of acting. It's just the way he looks, reacts. Hopper is fabulous in that scene as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because he just totally turns it right around on him and gets him to do what he wants. So
it's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
But anyway, I think we've talked Roger Moore to death, so I think, do you all want to go ahead and do the plot synopsis?
Yeah, I'll tell you what we'll do, so I don't interrupt. It's just worth touching on a couple of things.
Yep.
When the movie starts, it's got the first and only ever disclaimer on a Bond film, where it says, this is not based on anyone in real life or what have you. And the reason that appeared is because there was a guy called Zoran who was some kind of architect, I think, and he really disliked the fact he was a designer and didn't like the fact that his name was so close. So he literally threatened to sue them, so they had to put that on, which is quite important. Also, we're talking about it, Mary, about, not going to see it. Mm-hmm. The View to a Kill was not a huge hit in the States. It was a big hit over here in the UK, but in the States, like Octopussy had made $225 million. View to a Kill only made $161. But I think it's a much, much, much better film. And also, they changed the title halfway through, because it was originally called From a View to a Kill, because it was based on a short story which appeared in the Fleming novel For Your Eyes Only. And they changed it just to View to a Kill, just because of probably the song, I would have thought. But then again, when Simon Le Bon, he says, meeting you from a view to a kill. So he retained the full title in the song. I just thought that was a bit of trivia that we could just chuck in there.
Wow. No, that's good. That's good trivia. And one thing that I think feels a little bit forced in the movie is the first time they're flying around in the Zeppelin and they come over San Francisco and he's talking to Mayday. And she goes, "What a view!" And then Christopher Walken goes, "To a kill." That felt a little forced.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. But very worth talking about that because of the blimp. There's so many stuff. We're not going to talk about it all, Nick, because we haven't got time. But the blimp scene is great because obviously that was a pure mistake because the Bond people had seen the Fuji blimp flying over San Francisco, the one that used to fly over all the football games and what have you. They saw that and thought, wouldn't that be a great idea? So they went up to the highest point, facing the Golden Gate Bridge, and they said, look, could we use the balloon? They weren't too keen on that, but they took some shots of the Fuji balloon, the blimp, flying towards the Golden Gate Bridge. That was the first shots ever, and then they incorporated the shots, and he said John Glenn said they were the most expensive B team in history, because they basically ran up there with a tripod, a camera, a clapperboard, filmed it. Then they matched it shot for shot in Pinewood with a proper huge blimp and the bottom part of a blimp. And the reason that the Zorin logo is the way it looks and the colours is because if you look closely, you can see where the Goodyear, where the blimp is actually used. They wanted to use the same colours as what was on the one that was really flying over the Golden Gate Bridge for Fuji. So they wanted to match the Fuji colours just in case. So that's why the Zorin logo is the way it is, which is a lovely little story. So again, they got that shot and then based the whole thing around it.
Oh wow! And I love the blimps in this.
Yeah, they're great.
And by the way, those...
before we go, Nick, go on to it, it's rather than me banging on about all this stuff. Your missus has had first-hand experience because didn't she go to the Amberley chalk pits?
Yes, she did. And and she sent me. If I remember right, she sent me a picture of a Zorin cart.
Yeah, but they are still there. They're left there.
Yeah, the Zorin Industries
you sent that to me,
cart. Yes.
And I was very excited about that.
Yes, because she sent that to me, and I was like, Oh my God, it's Zoran Industries from
when
James
I went,
Bond.
Do you remember, Nick? We're leaving out one thing. Do you remember when we had our wonderful time in LA and we went to that amazing salvage yard?
Yes.
And we went down Rob. So we had the most Nick, whatever he was called. He had the most amazing name. Do you remember what we found in all the stuff? But it was too heavy for me to carry back.
Oh God!
It was one of the Zorin boxes with the ammunition. Do you not remember?
Oh, that's
it had Zorin
right.
across the side, and it was lying in a salvage yard. In a salvage yard. This guy had movie props in LA, and Nick Metropolis, that's what he was called.
That was it, yes, Nick Metropolis.
Nick Metropolis, and Nick and I went in, and we were just like, oh, and he came across, and because he heard me speaking, he said, well, okay, what are you guys after? I said, anything. This is like it was like going into Aladdin's cave, this place. They had huge props, heads, they had movie props, they hire stuff out. But you could buy stuff as well, and I got some great pictures of Nick lounging on stuff. They had stuff from loads of different movies. They had these bowling pins with all the different Universal monsters on it.
Yes.
And I wanted to buy one of those, but it was too heavy. I ended up buying something really weird, and I can't remember off the top of my head what it was.
Well, you bought a bunch of letters.
That's right. I bought letters for Mauve.
Yes, you bought letters.
From a cinema. From a cinema, and I spelt out Mauve, and it was from one of the old cinemas on Sunset Boulevard.
Yes,
that's it. Yeah, so that's what. There was the Zoran box, Nick, and do you remember? I was so beyond excited. I went,
yes,
but it was so heavy. I thought, there's no way. Because by that time, I was carrying back a full-size creature from the Black Lagoon mask and everything. So
yeah,
there ain't no way I'm going to be able to carry that back. And I had a rondo for Ray, I think, in my bag as well.
You did, and it was a busy trip.
It certainly was, but yeah, I just remembered that there. We actually have held one of the Zorro boxes. We have had one of the Zorro boxes.
That's true. So what? We have 1 degree of separation.
Absolutely.
Well, you already have it. You've got notes. Yeah.
You know, the blue screen and the Golden Gate. That's one of the best uses of blue screen ever because it's flawless. It's absolutely flawless. That blue screen. You know, on the Golden Gate at the edge, at the end there, when they've matched it.
When they're doing the big fight up there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, that was great.
Let's get on with the synopsis, Nick, because I know time's getting on.
Yeah, the time is getting on.
I haven't said enough, but you know.
Well, that's the thing. We could have the 8-hour podcast about a Bond film.
No one would want that.
And we'd still nobody would want it, but we'd still not talk about
probably
everything.
Could, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay, guess what, folks? This film has James Bond in it, and he's an MI6 agent, which it's one of those things. I always think it's funny. He's a British secret agent, but he seems to get to operate everywhere, which is awesome. So, the Americans were kind of like, he's there, so we're good. It's like, whatever, okay. But he's a British operative, obviously, from MI6, and the movie opens with him in Siberia, and he's he's looking for something, and he's got his little detector there with him. And he's detecting, but there's this whole, platoon of Russian troops. And the most un-Russian-looking helicopter I've ever seen. I mean, it was red, but it definitely did not fit with the troops that were down there. But they're all searching for the body of Agent 003. And Agent 003 has something, he's taken possession of something that Bond has to get. Well, he finds the body buried in the snow, and he gets this locket out. And I thought it was kind of telling that he opens up the locket, and inside there's a picture of, a woman and a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm like, oh, that's 003's family. And Bond just kind of tosses the picture away. And he gets he was on a mission. So no time for sentimentality, but still. But he gets what he's after, which it turns out to be a microchip. Well, there's a very big opening. They love doing these ski scenes in Bond films. Mm-hmm. And I always enjoy them, too, because I like skiing. So it's the one thing, sometimes when I'm skiing, I'm pretending I'm James Bond being chased.
No.
But I didn't really just say that as an adult.
Yeah, we all do that, Nick.
Yeah, well, that's right. I just missed the bullets, binging in the snow next to me. But anyway, so you've got he does this big scene and he loses a ski, and skiing on one ski is no easy thing to do, and it slows you down. And so he manages to steal a snowmobile, and then that gets blown up. But there, landing next to him, is the front runner ski from the snowmobile. And he's like, I've got a great idea. So he just sticks his feet into it and begins surfing, or snowboarding, as it now is known, down the mountain. And he's easily able to get away from the Russians on skis that are chasing him. And part of what's funny is he ends up skiing across his slope reaches a point where there's some unfrozen water, and he just scoots right across it on his he's
surfing.
He's surfing, and he just zips right across it, and the Russian guys all end up in the water and die horribly of hypothermia, most likely, but that's beside the point.
They're villains anyway.
Yeah, and this is when he escapes in the awesome, very phallic-shaped iceberg submarine that just happens to be there, so good on him. But he gets back to, after like 4 or 5 days of having sex in the submarine, he gets back to London, and Q has analyzed the microchip, and he figures out that it's an exact copy of one that's been introduced that is EMP proof. That is, it's proof against electromagnetic pulse. Mm-hmm. And this was one of the first movies where I'd really heard the phrase EMP and what it was, which is, the idea is that if you set off a nuclear weapon in the upper atmosphere, it will create a massive electromagnetic pulse that even if your nuclear weapon is set off where it doesn't, it's not going to kill anybody, the pulse will destroy microchips.
Or it's the entire plot of GoldenEye, Nick.
Yeah, exactly. Doing the EMP. And I'll be honest, EMPs are, to me, more terrifying than a lot of other possible things that can happen, because you can get that kind of pulse from solar flares or something very similar. And so there's this whole, just in case anybody needs something else to worry about, there's this whole concern that the entire power grid of most of the world could be burned out by a massive solar flare. So there, you can sleep well tonight, kids. But anyway, so this is the this is the thing. They know that the Russians now have this technology, and they figure that they must have gotten it from Zoran Industries, because Zoran Industries is the producer of the chips. And Zoran was just recently purchased, like 6 months before, I guess, by, Max Zoran, who had bought the microchip manufacturer and just renamed it to be Zoran's. So they send him to, I guess it was the Ascot race course, to watch the races, but also Zoran is going to be there, and Zoran's got a horse in the race, Pegasus. And this is when we're introduced to the idea that maybe he's doping his horses, and that's how he's winning. And this is one of the things that I like about this film. You're going down one road with all of this. It's like, okay, so he's leaking secrets to the Russians. He's doping his horses. Okay. Oh, wait, he's got a secret plot to sink half of California and take over the microchip industry. Of course, that's related to doping of race horses. But, that's beside the point. But anyway, this is also where we're introduced to Sir Godfrey Tibbett, who's played by McNee, and he's an MI6 agent who's also an expert racehorse trainer. And, he's the one that kind of sets the idea that, hey, Zoran's horses win constantly, and that probably means they're on some kind of drugs, because they always pull ahead during the last quarter mile, but yet when they're tested for drugs, nothing shows up in their system. So, Tibbett's going to end up helping Bond infiltrate a horse sale at Zoran's facility. But I have to get to how that happened. There's a private investigator named, Aubergine, which I think is funny, because isn't an aubergine an eggplant? Mm-hmm. Yeah, but anyway, Aubergine meets with Bond at this fancy restaurant up in about the mid-level of the Eiffel Tower. And they're having dinner or lunch, I guess.
I always wanted to go to that restaurant.
Well, you know, I don't want to ever go to that restaurant. And I'll tell you why. There's some chick sitting on the stage whistling, and a guy with a fishing rod is there throwing butterflies at you. And, okay, so I understand Zoran sends Mayday to kill Aubergine because Aubergine's been investigating him. Okay, and at this point, Mayday is there to kill him. It's just convenient that she's there to kill him when Bond happens to be there. But again, very elaborate preparation for this to check and see that the butterfly lady would be whistling that day as the entertainment, and then dress completely like the person in All in Black that's there with a fishing rod making all the butterflies dance, so that you could use a poison fishing lure to slap a poison butterfly fish, I guess, or whatever, hook into Aubergine and kill him right there in front of Bond. Okay? So, and of course, this is when Bond does his, there's a fly in my soup quip when Aubergine has died. But it's fun. But this leads to that really famous chase up the Eiffel Tower where, you know, he's chasing Mayday, and Mayday gets higher and higher till she finally gets to where she can't go any higher, and that's when we have her dive off of the Eiffel Tower. And Grace Jones actually did the dive off of the fake little soundstage Eiffel Tower that they built into, you know, a cushion or whatever. And that's a pretty good stunt by itself for her to do, to dive face first into a, you know, off of something. Yeah. And so that shows up, but then you have the parachute stunt that we were talking about earlier.
That's incredible.
That's a great parachute stunt. And I love the fact that James Bond is able to get off of the Eiffel Tower, get outside, steal a taxi, and go chasing after her to, you know, for her to catch her. And she lands on, you know, this party boat that's going down, you know, the Champs-Élysées there in Paris. And the car chase is crazy. Yeah. Because, you know, James Bond, the car gets its top knocked off, and then the car gets hit from the side. And, of course, it's a front-wheel drive car, so when they knock the back half of the car off, James Bond just keeps going because that's what James Bond does. And he ends up jumping on the party boat and almost catches Grace Jones. But then he misses her.
Yeah.
And she gets away because Zoran's pulled up in a boat, and that's when James Bond's arrested by the French police, and, you know, M has to come bail him out and gripe at him about how much it cost and all this, blah, blah, blah. You know, that's the thing. M must spend a whole lot of money cleaning up after James Bond. That's all I'm going to say. But anyway, they figure out that, okay, Zoran's definitely involved. Let's go to his horse sale at his estate in France. And that's it. How do you say it? Chantilly? Is that it?
Yeah.
The estate? Yeah, Chantilly. Yeah. I want to make sure I'm saying it right because I usually massacre my French. And it's just this huge, beautiful estate. And at one point when Bond arrives, he's actually looking at the guest or at the servants' quarters. And he says, "Oh, are those the stables?" Because they're huge, massive building. And the guy, and, you know, it's Scar just says, "No, those are the servants' quarters. The stables are over there." And when you look, it looks like a palace with horses dancing around it. And that's when you got the line that, you know, the original builder thought that he was going to die and be reincarnated as a horse.
So he think, Nick, that's pure Fleming, that. Don't you think? That's pure Fleming.
It is. It's beautiful. And that is such a good line to fit with that, and it makes sense. You know, there's part of me that figures that must be the actual case because those were some really nice stables. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so he infiltrates as I can't even say his name, St. John Smythe, James St. John Smythe, which continues 007's tradition of being the worst undercover operative ever because he's always saying James regardless, and he's always ordering the same bloody vodka martini shaken not stirred.
Even the one he uses for Tanya Roberts, that's James Stock. So he even uses James. It's probably because he's rubbish at remembering who he's supposed to be called.
That's it. You know, and he figures
after a while.
Well, it's all rough. But anyway, he's at this huge horse sale, and apparently he gets to stay there for a couple of days for the horse sales. And while he's there, he observes Tanya Roberts' character show up, and she's Stacy Sutton, and she was the granddaughter of an oil tycoon that Zoran basically came in and did a hostile takeover on his business and took away most everything she had. But and Granddad died, of course, too. But anyway, so she's there, and Bond doesn't know why, but he sees Zoran writing her a check, and he's like, I need to find this out. So he breaks into the office later and uses a credit card swiper, it looks like, to make a copy of the last check written based on the impression that it made in the check below it, which that's a good little Bond gadget regardless. And the copy showed that it was a $5 million check made out to her. So, anyway, about this time, James Bond's running around. They find the secret doping laboratory run by the Nazi scientist who actually created Zoran, essentially, through his genetic breeding. And, we get introduced to all the baddies, and Bond does a bunch of snooping around. He ends up having sex with Mayday, it's just kind of because it's a good way to cover for the fact that he wasn't in his room when he had been out snooping around. But the next day, Tibbet takes the Rolls Royce to be washed, and sure enough, he gets, I guess, choked to death from the back seat by Mayday when it goes through the wash.
That bothered me because here's like the super secret great agent, and he was just supposed to go and warn, everybody what was going on, and why did he bother getting the car actually washed? He was, that was just supposed to be the cover.
There were no mobile phones there. There were no mobile phones then. So basically, he was going out because he had to phone from outside the chateau.
Right. But he didn't really need to get the car washed.
No, he's just because he said that to the guy, didn't he? Say, I'm just going to get the car washed. So he wanted to back himself up.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did need to get it washed, Mary, because if it was dirty and he went out to wash it and he came back and it was still dirty.
You would think the first thing he would do would be make that phone call.
Well,
if he was such a great agent, he should have just gone out and made the phone call and then go,
I'm looking into this too much.
Yeah, okay, Mary, I'm going to say this. The reason he didn't make the phone call was the plot had to proceed.
That's true.
The movie would have been really, really bad if it had just ended with the police showing up and arresting Zoran there in his chateau, you know?
You're right.
Then it would have been Zoran goes to prison, and that's a completely different movie.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they figured out, and we also get introduced to the fact that, because General Gogo shows up at one point, and that's when we get introduced to the fact that, and this is after Zoran has made his move. He's killed Tibbet. He thinks he's killed Bond, but Bond wakes up in time to get out of the Rolls Royce and just sit under the water looking up, but taking the air out of the tire.
That was
that's
good.
That's a very James Bond thing to do also.
It's one of my favorites. It's one of my favorite bits of Bond. That I've said before, I love that. I thought that was a great touch. It's the kind of thing that was missing from Octopussy and the like.
Yeah. I would definitely agree. But he gets that, he gets the air and he manages to survive, and he starts chasing. Well, he leaves. Zoran then meets up with Golgo, and it turns out that General Gogo of the KGB, who's been kind of a recurring character in the Bond films since The Spy Who Loved Me.
From Much of Love first.
Well, yeah, but was it the same actor then too?
Yes, same actor. Yeah. Well,
okay, so he's been consistent from the beginning.
He wasn't General Gogol there. He was just a henchman in From Russia with Love, and then he came back instead. From Spy Who Loved Me onwards, he was the guy. He was pop up and everything.
Okay, that makes sense. So anyway, he's like, hey, we made you, Zoran, and Zoran has his own henchman there, And he's like, I'm done being your lackey. Ha, ha, ha. And Grace Jones starts bench pressing KGB agents. And apparently Dolph Lundgren shows up and puts a gun to somebody's head, which I am so going to go look for now, by the way. But anyway, so all this establishes that Zorn is no longer with the KGB. He's going to do his own thing. And Bond has to stop him. But nobody knows what his own thing, his master plan is. So Bond ends up following Zorn to San Francisco, and that's where he meets up with CIA agent Chuck Lee, played by David Yip, was it? Yeah. And he's and Lee is telling him that Zorn is actually a product of medical experimentation. So this is when we find out about the whole Nazi scientist, Dr. Karl Mortner, who is Zorn's physician, but he's also kind of Zorn's dad, when you think about it. And that's kind of creepy. But anyhow, Bond is investigating. We have the great scene with the little model while Zorn's explaining his plan to sink Silicon Valley, and one of the investors decides he's going to drop out. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's a brilliant line because of course, because the meeting's happening there in a blimp. So of course, drop out means they end up kicking him out of the blimp. But while all this is going on, they get an audio tape of it, and and of a lot of the plot, or not all of it, but they get enough audio tape evidence that would be something to go on with. But then, what is it? Paula, what was her name?
Ivanova.
Yeah, Paula Polanova. Or Paula Ivanova.
Ivanova, yeah.
Yeah, Ivanova. Yeah, she ends up hooking up with Bond after he's finding out more of the plot, which is that Zorn is using his oil wells to pump seawater into the oil wells near Silicon Valley, which is very weird. But anyhow, Inova takes him back to her place. They have a little bit of, weirdly themed because she's a Russian agent with a British agent in San Francisco. So they have a Japanese themed apartment where they're playing, Japanese style music while they're in the jacuzzi. But it's kind of funny. But she runs out with the tape and gives it to Golgo, and they start listening to it. And instead of being the conversation, Bond has tricked her and given her the tape of the Japanese music from the hot tub scene. So anyway, Bond starts trying to track down Stacy Sutton because he finds out, that she's a state geologist, but also she's the woman that Zorn attempted to pay off, and that's Tanya Roberts. And there's this great fight scene because she gets the drop on Bond when he breaks into her palatial family estate that's running out of furniture because she's selling everything because Zorn's taking all her money. And, she gets the drop on him with a shotgun. Then Zorn's henchmen show up to try and persuade her, and Bond takes the shotgun and begins defending her. But he shoots these guys, and then they just get up. And it turns out the shotgun's full of rock salt, which rock salt hurts a lot, but it's not going to kill you if you get shot with it. I mean, unless it was like right up against your head or something. But anyway, it's a fun little fight scene, and they end up partnering together, and they're going to try and figure out what Zorn's doing. So they end up at City Hall, where they're looking for the plans for Zorn's stuff. And Zorn catches them, ends up setting fire to City Hall, leads to a huge chase on a fire truck through San Francisco, which, as Mark pointed out, is something that you just couldn't do today. Not on that scale.
Yeah.
And because the mayor of San Francisco was so behind this film, and that's why they had the premiere in the U.S. first, actually. But
premiere,
Bond
when it was the premiere, Nick, they raised $1,000 and $007. Sorry, $100,000 and $007. And the guy who I talked about, who jumped off the Eiffel Tower, parachuted into the square where they were holding the conference with Dianne Feinstein, the mayor and everything, and handed her the check for the city charities, which is pretty cool.
Wow!
Oh, that is awesome. Wow. See, it just gets better and better. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, so Bond and Stacy, they manage to track Zorin down and find that he's got this mine they've gone to. And when they infiltrate the mine, they discover his plot is to detonate all these explosives right underneath a lake that's near Silicon Valley, and it's between the Hayward and the San Andreas Faults. And once this lake is drained, then they'll set off this detonation of these massive explosives. I mean, literally hundreds of tons of dynamite. And this is going to trigger the earthquake because it's right at the juncture of the two fault lines. And if this geological phenomenon with all the explosives on it, if it's gone, then the San Andreas and the Hayward faults would move together, and most likely it would cause that part of California to sink below sea level, and then the whole thing's going to flood, and Silicon Valley is going to become a lake and kill millions of people. And at this point, Bond and Stacy are like, "Oh my God, we gotta stop this." And Zorin sets the timer for 3,600 seconds, which is about an hour. So they've got an hour to stop him. Well, then, of course, Zorin finds out he's there, and they have a big chase down into the mines, and Zorin sends Mayday and Jenny Flex and Pan Ho after him. And he tells get the mine workers back to work. Well, the clock is running, and Zorin figures it's not going to be a good idea for him to be there when the bomb goes off. So he decides to go ahead and he goes ahead and blows up the lake so that the lake will flood the mines and in turn flood all of his oil wells. And this is going to create the pressure that the big bomb going off needs to cause the earthquake and to destroy all of California. So Bond's being chased by Mayday. Zorin sets off the bomb. Everybody dies except for Bond, Mayday, and Stacy. And they survive. By the way, spoiler alert here, folks. I'm going all the way through this. And so they end up teaming up, or at least Bond and Mayday team up, because she's really upset that Zorin basically left her to die. And also killed, Jenny Flex and Pan Ho. She's not as bothered by the fact that he's been out there with an Uzi mowing down all the mine workers that tried to escape, from his horrible watery death. But, she kind of turns from the dark side to the light side. And so she helps Bond defuse the bomb, but then they can't really defuse it, though. They've just got to get it away from the other explosives. And they put it on a mine cart, but the mine cart has a handbrake, and she ends up getting on the mine cart and holding the handbrake, because if she doesn't, it'll stop, and she rides it right out of the mine. And now Zorin, in his inexplicable love for blimps, and of course it is explicable because, hey, you need this iconic scene at the end of the film with a blimp over the Golden Gate Bridge, and that's where the big climactic fight's going to be. So Zorin has brought his hidden blimp out, and he's flying over because he wants to watch the destruction of California from the air. And he sees Mayday come out of the mine with the explosives just in time to, basically, she's yelling at him and blows up, and Zorin's all mad, but then Stacy comes running along, and we have what I think is the biggest stretch of the imagination in the whole movie. Zorin sneaks up on Stacy as she's running towards James Bond in a blimp.
Yeah.
He sneaks up on her in a blimp. That's just, I can't sneak up on people in socks, okay, let alone in a blimp. But anyhow, he grabs her, goes flying off, and he's going to, I'm still evil. Well, Bond grabs one of the mooring cables. Okay, evil geniuses, when you are flying away in your blimp, your lighter-than-air ship, you should reel in your cables, because it's just going to cause no end of problems. I'm just saying. Reel in those mooring lines, because sure enough, James Bond he's on the mooring line. Zorin sees him, and so he's trying to knock him off, and there's a couple of comedic scenes with some TV antennas and whatnot, but he really decides the way to get him is to smack him into the side of the Golden Gate Bridge. Well, Bond being Bond, he's able to survive hitting the Golden Gate Bridge and actually loops the rope around a bunch of the cables in the bridge. And so all of a sudden, Zoran's lighter-than-air ship is stuck. And so Zoran's trying to fight the ship off of it, ends up kind of crashing into the Golden Gate Bridge and opening up the side. Tanya Roberts jumps out and escapes. Christopher Walken comes out with an axe. And we have this really weird axe fight with between Christopher Walken and Roger Moore, Bond and Zoran. And, of course, Walken starts falling off the Golden Gate Bridge, and Bond is there looking at him. And at this point, the Nazi doctor comes out of the blimp, and he's like, "Oh, Zoran!" And you really see he's very upset that his creation, I guess his son, for all intents and purposes, just falls off the bridge. And Christopher Walken gets this brilliant, crazy look in his eye right before he falls. And it's just like, yeah, I'm falling.
And
screw all y'all.
And he laughs as well.
Yeah. And he laughs, and he just falls. And then Bond, the Nazi guy tries to shoot Bond, and he doesn't have any luck, so he does what any good comedic villain would do. He runs in and grabs a big wad of dynamite and lights it, and he's going to throw it at Bond, only Bond has the axe, conveniently enough, and he cuts that mooring cable. Well, the pilot, Scar, had been trying to pull the blimp off of the bridge, and so when the mooring cable's cut, the blimp just lurches away from the bridge. The Nazi falls over and blows up the airship. And then James Bond has sex with Stacy. And, of course, we have the scene where all of the big wigs, the muckety-mucks, are trying to find out, where is James Bond? We need to give him this Russian Medal of Honor and all this. And of course, Q's there with his odd little robot spy spying on James Bond in the shower. So, hey, how very iconic James Bond ending there also, I might add.
Absolutely. And Roger Moore ends with a laugh, which is exactly how you really go, ooh, it's very carry on. But,
yeah.
The interesting thing is that little robot, that was another scene that was cut, because in there he was breaking in to do some surveillance, and it was spraying stuff on the relevant guard dogs and everything, but it was never used. But the interesting thing about this film is that it was the first ever Bond film. When it ended, rather than giving the title of the next movie, actually said, James Bond will return, and that's it. So that's the first Bond, because they didn't know what they were going to do. Although people say that A Living Daylights was written for Roger Moore, which I find odd, but is supposedly true, they didn't know what they were going to do next, whereas throughout all of these movies, they always knew what the next movie was going to be, apart from the fact when they changed a couple of them over, like obviously, You Only Live Twice or what have you, they're going to change the running orders of at the end of Spy Who Loved Me, it said James Bond will be back in For Your Eyes Only, which was wrong. Well, obviously it was Moonraker, because the popularity of Star Wars made them film Moonraker instead. But the first time it had ever said that, and ever since, it's only said James Bond will return, and this was the first movie to do that. And it was an era. It was the end of an era for Roger, for Lewis Maxwell. To the 70s and the 80s Bonds, it was the end of an iconic run, because, no matter how many people detract against Roger Moore, he kept this series going throughout the 70s. There were some dire films made in the 70s. He kept the Bond series going through those and through the 80s, and he was up against it. By the time Dalton came in, they were up against it even more with the Lethal Weapons and the Terminators and what have you, the Terminator was out just before this one, but like Terminator 2 and stuff, so there was big movies coming out. But without Roger Moore, the series wouldn't have existed in the 70s and halfway through the 80s without him. So, hats off to him.
Yeah.
Oh, for real. And this is a good movie to go out on because, he still could do what he needed to do, and, okay, I love Raiders of the Lost Ark. I love Indiana Jones. They're filming a new one right now with Harrison Ford. Mm-hmm. And I know that supposedly they're going to hand over the torch to, like, the next generation or whatever in this. Mm-hmm. But Harrison Ford's almost 80.
They're on a hiatus right now because he got hurt.
Movie just wants to say hi, guys, because we're literally about to leg it off to our friends to watch the footage. So just say hi.
Awesome. Hi. Hey, Mauve. Oh, this is why I love doing the cast with Mark also, because we invariably get to say hi to Mauve, and it is so much fun to have her on the show.
You love a beautiful kill, don't you, Mauve? Yeah, you do.
And sometime you're going to have to do an entire episode with us, by the way.
I'm going to have Mauve alongside me with when we do the Halloween cast of Rocky Horror.
Oh, that'll be awesome.
Yeah, and we're all doing it in costume. I'm getting a pair of Emma's tights.
Oh, no.
Oh, well, if we do it in costume, I'll get in costume, too. And then we can do a Zoom.
Yeah, Xanthi's going to join in on that one as well.
Wow.
So, yeah, just not, but, it'll be fun. But anyway, guys, so, Mary, go back. Now we've talked about it, I hope you get to like it a little bit more. It deserves to be reevaluated, this film. It really is. It's the one that's always left out. And I love this film, along with Nick. We are the defenders of the sort of harsh film, like Halloween 3, like this one.
Yeah.
We like all films that we like, and I think this is one of the ones that it really does need to give it another shot. I'm sure you won't find it as boring as you may think or led to believe it is. It's one of my absolute favorite Bond films.
It's very suspenseful. It's very well made.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love the whole story, the background, all the characters. I think it's a great swan song, and it's the end of an era Bond, and it's really important for me because the Roger Moore ones are the ones I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, it's very important to me, and it was sad to see him go, but obviously Dalton was a great Bond, and didn't get the credit he deserved at the time. But now people are saying, actually, Casino Royale's great and Daniel Craig's great, but it was all done before with Timothy Dalton. It really was. It did take Bond back to the books, but there you go.
All right.
Are we doing one with Timothy Dalton?
No, we're going to do a bunch of secret. We were going to do it twice, but I think with this, it's quite a big schedule. So we're just going to save the next one. Will be on a Magic Secret Service, which will be the Christmas one.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's a Christmas one for a reason, but we will talk about that at Christmas.
Okay.
All right, guys. Well, I think we've just about beat A View to a Kill to death.
Yes.
Now, we don't have a contest and we don't have feedback for this episode. All that said, Mark, it was absolute delight to have you on the cast, by the way.
Great to be here, guys.
Yes.
And, you always bring so many good stories, and that's what really makes it. I mean, just hearing all the insight, it's like these episodes could be a special feature on a Bond disc.
Mm-hmm.
So,
just for your little stories. I love them.
All right.
So
but after that Grace Jones story, you won't be having a taco in the near future.
No, I think I'll pass.
All right, guys, been a pleasure. You take care.
Hey, thanks, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Bye, Mary.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Adios, Mafia.
Well, they've gone.
For good, John?
No, just for now. It wasn't the right time for us to meet. But there'll be other nights, other stars for us to watch. They'll be back.
The ghosts are moving tonight, restless, hungry.
All right, fellas, here's your story.
Greetings, my friend. We are all interested in the future, for that is where you and I are going to spend the rest of our lives. And we cannot keep this a secret any longer.
Wait, Captain. I have found evidence of intelligent beings on this planet.
Look to the skies. It's the B-Movie Cookbook. Menus inspired by 15 of your favorite B-movies from the 1950s, with teenage werewolves, blobs, and enough cheese for everyone.
When we return to our planet, the High Court may well sentence you to torture.
But until then, we've got Ed Wood and Vincent Price.
There'll be food and drink and ghosts, and perhaps even a few murders. You're all invited.
So impress your friends with dinner and a movie with the B-Movie Cookbook. We've got you covered. Get your copy today at bmoviecookbook.com. That's bmoviecookbook.com.
Let me see that book. I am interested to see what sways your mind so heavily.
Sure thing. Just visit bmoviecookbook.com.
Anybody around here want some coffee?
Transmission.
guys always win. Even in the 80s.